Chapter 19. Jade saw a tall and handsome figure standing in front of her, and heard him praising her beauty. Her heart suddenly felt sweet, but her face was still expressionless, said, "You only know how to talk nonsense, what Shi Xiang. Don't be ashamed." Tian Belize frowned. Serene already said, "Ling Er, don't talk nonsense." Kevin quickly said to Serene, "Su Shi Shu, please don't blame Shimmy. It is all my fault for speaking without thinking and offending her." Speaking till here, he pondered for a moment, took out a small box from his bosom, handed it to Jade, smiled. "Tian Shimmy, the refreshing pearl in this small box is something I obtained by chance a few years ago when I followed my master Vaskalo Jinren on the path of chivalry, annihilated a group of Falcon villains. Although it is not a rare treasure, but it can be used to reduce summer heat, and is also said to have some benefits for women's skincare. Today I will give it to Shimmy, treat it as my apology." Jade blushed again, but before she could speak, Serene already said, "Kevin Shurji, this refreshing pearl is also a treasure. Jade cannot accept it. You better keep it quickly." Kevin smiled. "Su Shi Shu does not know. This refreshing pearl is not very useful to me, like chicken ribs. But Tian Shimmy is young and beautiful, just right to use. Consider it as a small token of my appreciation. Hope Tian Shimmy does not dislike it." Jade looked at Kevin. Her expression was already much more gentle. Took the small box, quietly said, "Thank you, Kevin Shi Xiang." Kevin seemed to be extremely happy. With a face full of smiles, said, "No need to thank. No need to thank. Shimmy, you are talented and intelligent. Your future is limitless. Speaking of which, although there are many talents in Jadian, but to have a talent like yours is very few, I am also willing to admit defeat." Tian Belize heard it. For the first time a smile appeared on his face. Jade said, "Shi Xiang flatters me." Kevin shook his head. "Not so. I was also enlightened by my master when I was young, but when I was your age, my practice was already much worse than yours." But Tian Linger was a young girl. Hearing Keheo's praise, she had a good impression of him, but hearing him say "but," she could not help but ask, "But what?" At this time, Tian Belize and Serene also turned their heads, wanted to hear what Kevin meant by "but." Kevin said, "But in terms of talent, there are people who can match Tian Shimmy." Tian Linger was taken aback for a moment and said, "Who?" Kevin smiled and pointed outside the Observe Silence Hall. "It is my Lin Shitty. 3 years ago, he was accepted by my master, Master Vaskalo, and in just a few years, he has made amazing progress. He is a genius in the path of cultivation, and no one in our sect can compete with him. In just 3 years, he broke through to Yu Qing stage level 4. I have never heard of such a person in 1,000 years." Speaking up to here, Chi Hao's eyes were full of love as he said, "My master is full of praises for junior brother Lin, calling him a genius that appears once in 1,000 years, almost comparable to ancestor Greenleaf." Pa! A crisp sound. Everyone was shocked, turned to look at the source of the sound. Tian Bai's face was ashen, his expression extremely ugly. The hard sandalwood armrest in his hand was actually forcefully twisted off by him. Kevin startled for a moment, then whispered to Serene, "Su Shi Shu, did I say something wrong?" Serene forced a smile and was about to open her mouth. Suddenly a shout came from outside the hall. Before the voice died away, a figure fell from outside the hall and landed on the ground with a plop. The momentum did not stop, and he even rolled a few times. His head and face were covered in dirt, and he was in an extremely sorry state. Everyone looked closely. If it is not Sha Danan, who is it? Bamboo Peak people's face changed. Jade was the closest to Sha Danan. She rushed forward and helped him up, quickly asked, "Xiao Fan, what happened to you?" Sha Danan's fall was not light. His head was still a little dizzy, but his mouth still said, "No, nothing, I am fine." At that moment, Bei also ran in from outside the door. His face was anxious, said, "Xiao Fan, are you okay? I made a mistake." Jade knew it was this person who bullied her shitty. Her anger rose. Plus, Kever had just praised Bei in front of his face, implying that he was not as good as him. Her heart was very uncomfortable. She did not think much, stood up and said angrily, "What right do you have to bully people?" As she said this, She pointed with her hand, and a ray of light flashed. The amber vermilion silk had already been activated. With a so sound, it rushed toward Bay. Serene and Kevin shouted at the same time, "Stop!" But Phoenix Soul was as fast as lightning, arrived in front of Bay in a moment. Although Bay was surprised, he did not panic. Seeing the colorful scene in front of him, he knew it was an esper. He immediately took 3 steps back, left hand pointing to the sky, right hand pointing to the ground, shouted, "Rise!" Clang! The dragon's roar resounded in observed silence hall. Bay's body was covered with green light. A bright green sword was released. The sword blade was clear like autumn water, emitting propitious steam. Not only it blocked the fierce rays of light from Phoenix Soul, but also reflected everyone's face in observed silence hall into green color. Tion Belize suddenly snorted, said coldly, "Vast Kalo is really generous," actually passed Dragon Slayer to him. Kevin saw Bay was not injured, relaxed, smiled, and said, "My master once said, Shitty's talent is outstanding, will become a great person. Therefore, it is necessary to put effort into training him." Tion Belize's face was even uglier. At this moment, Phoenix Soul and Dragon Slayer were locked in a stalemate, but Tion Linger's beautiful eyes widened. Both her arms shook, her red clothes fluttered, her body slowly rose into the air, left and right hands crossed in front of her chest, made orchid fingers, shouted, "God bind." Her voice had just landed. The multicolored light suddenly lengthened. The 3-chi long amber vermilion silk in front of her suddenly retreated and stopped in front of Tion Linger. After a crisp sound, the multicolored light flourished, growing as it met the wind, swift beyond compare. In that instant it grew by many times, filling the entire observed silence hall's sky to the brim, immediately suppressing the Dragon Slayer sword's green light. The next moment, it transformed into thousands of silk ropes and charged towards Lin Jingyu, surrounding him in the middle, airtight. Serene stood up, shouted to the sky, "Linger, don't be presumptuous." But while she was speaking, the thousands of zhongs of red silk had already tightly surrounded Lin Jingyu. Not only everyone could not see Lin Jingyu, even Tion Linger's figure in the air was also covered by layers and layers of red silk. Zhang Xiao Danan could only stare in bewilderment. Marvelous. Suddenly someone behind him praised, "Phoenix Soul, it really lives up to its reputation." He turned his head and looked. It was Kevin who was staring fixedly at the scene, his mouth mumbling something, but did not have the slightest look of worry. Seeing that Tion Linger's victory was already decided, the crowd suddenly heard an ear-piercing sound. A gap suddenly appeared in the layers of red silk, revealing a little green light. Tion Belize and Surin's countenance changed at the same time. Roar! A loud sound, like an angry dragon roaring. The sound shook the 9 heavens. In that instant, that gap enlarged 100 times. The green light flourished again, tearing the silk and coming out. Bay became one with the sword. His whole body faintly showed the shape of a dragon, like an arrow released from the bow. Unstoppable charge towards Tion Linger. Everyone turned pale, but Tion Linger, although surprised, did not panic. Both hands guarded in front of her chest, swiftly made a Tai Chi diagram. In a moment, the layers of red silk returned in front of her, turned into countless protective screens. Shattering sounds were heard incessantly. Lin Jingyu's Dragon Slayer sword pierced through layer after layer of red silk. Although its momentum was slightly slower, but its indomitable momentum did not diminish. It looked like the two of them were about to determine the victor of life and death. Zhang! A burst of coldness passed. The Dragon Slayer, like hitting a broken cotton, bounced back. Bei turned pale with fright, looked up and saw that in a moment, between him and Tion Linger, an ice wall had formed. The cold air attacked. The Dragon Slayer's power was astonishing, but still could not break through this ice wall. And Kevin had unknowingly rushed in front of him, pulled him back about 1 zhang. On the other side, Tion Linger's face was pale. Serene, in the blink of an eye, had already rushed forward, pulled her into her arms, retreated to Tion Bai's side. The 2 celestial espers were no longer controlled, gradually lost their light. each flew back to their owner's hands. In the hall of observed silence. Chapter 20. Tian stood up, looked Bei up and down, his face extremely ugly, coldly said, "Good skill. Good murderous intent." Kevin whispered to Bei, "Shitty, apologize." Bei was young, his eyebrows frowned, stepped forward, said to Sha Danan, "Xiao Fan, it was my fault. I said it was just a test of our cultivation, but I did not hold back, sorry." Sha Danan was worried for his friend, but he could only say, "No, it's nothing." The Bamboo Peak people's face changed. Tian Beli's anger increased. He suddenly stepped forward. Red energy flashed across his face. Kevin's face changed. He was different from Bei. He had been in Jadian for a long time. He knew Bamboo Peak's strength is far from the other 6 houses, but head of house Tian Beli's and his wife Serene have amazing power. No one dares to look down on them. The arrogant Taoist Vas Kalo also warned him before he left. Tian Bui is not magnanimous, but his cultivation is extremely high. Plus his wife Serene is also a famous talented lady in Jadian. Even the head Reverend Doyle Shun also respects them. So unless it is absolutely necessary, do not provoke him. But Lin Jingyu was completely unaware of this. But looking at his appearance, even if he knew, he most likely wouldn't take it to heart. At such a young age, his pride was extremely heavy. Most likely it was because of Taoist songs pampering and spoiling. Tian Bui looked at him and became even more furious. Was about to make a move when suddenly a figure flashed. Suru was already standing beside her husband, stretched out her hand to pull him. A faint smile on her lips, quietly said, "Already so old, quarreling with your own sect juniors. What kind of appearance is that?" Tian Beli, startled, stopped. Kevin quickly stood in front of his shitty, smiled and said, "Tian Shu is magnanimous. Please do not lower yourself to our junior's level for the sake of our master." Sha Danan saw Bei had angered his master. He was anxious. In his eyes, Bei, who was also an orphan of Grass Temple Village, was like his own brother. Seeing Kevin pleading for Bei, his heart was warm. He could not help but run out and kneel in front of Tian Beli, said, "Master, it is all disciples' fault. I saw Bei, Lin Shi Xiao came on his sword. I wanted to see his practice, so I attacked. Everything is disciple." Tian Beli's was already depressed in his heart, a wave of anger that could not be vented. He suppressed it. Kevin was fine, but seeing Sha Danan was also kneeling in front of him, talkative and stupid, anger rose in his heart. "Shut up, useless thing." Then he waved his sleeve. Sha Danan felt a strong wind hit his face. Suddenly his body became light. The air around him seemed to have disappeared. His head was heavy and his feet light. Then a powerful force came at him. His body flew backward, hit the wall of observed silence hall. Bang! He hit the wall and fell down. Sha Danan felt dizzy. His throat tasted sweet, then spat out a mouthful of blood. In the observed silence hall, everyone was stunned. "Dad!" Heidi shouted and rushed to help Sha Danan up. Bei also rushed at the same time. Seeing the blood on Sha Danan's chest, his anger rose. If he was injured, he would not be so angry, but seeing Sha Danan pleading for him ended up like this, Bei did not care anymore. He turned to Tian Beli's and shouted, "Short fatty, what are you doing?" While speaking, Dragon Slayer seemed to sense its master's thoughts. The green light brightened again. Tian Beli's eyebrows raised. He was probably angry because of the word short fatty. He waved his sleeve and disappeared in front of everyone. Kevin shouted, "Shitty, be careful." Bei was already on guard. Seeing Tian Beli's was like a ghost. He immediately raised Dragon Slayer in front of him and used the green sword energy to protect his body. Just as his vision blurred, Tian Bai's short and stout body actually ignored the streaks of sharp green light. Suddenly appeared in front of him. All of the green light sword energy was still 3 chi away from his body and could not advance any further. Bei's heart jumped. He saw Tian Bai's glaring eyes were almost touching his face. He panicked and stepped back. Even so, the Dragon Slayer sword was still not in a mess, held horizontally in front of him to protect its master. Tian Beli's laughed coldly. His right hand thrust into the sword energy. A layer of red light appeared on his palm, and blocked the green light. In the blink of an eye, Dragon Slayer was in his hand. Kevern immediately rushed to the middle of the field, shouted, "Tian Shu, have mercy." Tian Belize did not pursue. He let Kevern protect Bay behind him. He only looked at the Dragon Slayer in his hand. By now, almost all of the green sword energy had already dissipated, but the Dragon Slayer sword seemed to have intelligence, flashing in Tian Bai's fat hand, struggling incessantly, reflecting half of his body green, but still unable to struggle free. Tian Belize raised his eyes and said coldly, "Dragon Slayer is indeed the Nine Heavens' celestial weapon, but may not be invincible." His 5 fingers suddenly exerted force. Dragon Slayer seemed to have received a heavy blow and immediately stopped moving. After a moment, the whole sword suddenly glowed with green sword energy again. It was bright and dazzling. It was many times brighter than when it was in Bai's hand. Kevern said, "Tian Shu." Tian Bai's face was as cold as frost. Without another word, his right hand gripped the Dragon Slayer's sword tightly, slashed down towards Kevern in Bai's direction. A sharp piercing sound resounded. In that instant, the sharp whistling sound resounded. The green light was as wild as a mountain and became a green pillar as tall as 2 people. Like a raging wave piercing through the sky, it shot out. Kevern clenched his teeth. Both of his hands held the incantation sign. A white celestial sword rose up. It was his famous frozen ice. In a blink of an eye, Tian Belize's green sword energy broke the air. Kevern protected Bai and retreated a few steps. His right hand formed the incantation sign. Frozen ice flashed with white light. The cold air increased. In a moment, 7 ice walls were formed in front of them. Bang, bang sounds were heard continuously. The green sword chi had already hit the ice walls, but it was completely different from before. This time the Dragon Slayer sword was like a hot knife through butter. The sound of ice breaking was heard. In a short moment, the 7 ice walls were smashed into pieces. Ice shards splashed everywhere. The green sword chi did not decrease even a little bit. Instead, it was even more powerful. Like an angry dragon roaring, it bared its fangs and brandished its claws as it charged towards Keheo. Kevern's face was pale. He could not dodge. He had to use all his strength. His 10 fingers moved. Frozen ice released thousands of white light and formed a shield in front of him. Boom! The green sword chi hit the white light. Even though it did not shatter immediately, it pushed the white light back. Kevern's eyes were wide open. He used all his strength and managed to block the seemingly unstoppable green sword chi 1 foot in front of him. At this moment, he only felt the green light flashing in front of him. The wind howled. It was so close. It was as if he was facing a ferocious beast. It was frightening. Before he could regain his composure, the surging green light pressed down on him. Kevern used all his strength to keep the white light from dispersing. His feet could no longer support it. He was pushed back by the great force. From a start till now, Tian Bui had been standing at his original position, did not move at all, but the green sword energy released by the Dragon Slayer in his hand actually became stronger as it went further. Keheo and Keheo were pushed to the door of Observed Silence Hall by this great force, and still kept on being pushed back. Especially when they reached the open space outside the hall, the green light became even brighter. Wherever it passed, the open space looked like it was slashed by a huge, sharp knife, drawing out huge gullies of 1 chi deep, ghastly. This frightening green sword energy continuously shot out from the Hall of Observed Silence, forcing Kevern and his companion to retreat a full 30 feet. The white light in front of Kevern was compressed to less than half a foot away from his body. He was also breathing heavily. His face turned from red to green. His feet had sunk deep into the ground. After a moment, Kevern finally shouted. He could not hold on any longer. The white light dissipated. Frozen Ice Sword was sent flying out of control by the great force. Kevern and Bai's faces were pale. The green sword aura was right in front of them. It was a matter of life and death. But suddenly, it stopped in midair. Kevern's palms were sweating. He did not dare to move. Chapter 21. After a short while, The green light seemed to have lost control and slowly dispersed. Zhang! With a sharp sound, the ice sword landed once more, stabbing in front of the two of them. Kevern calmed down, quickly said respectfully to the direction of Hall of Quietude, "Thank you, Tian Shirshu, for your mercy." Bei saw the normal-looking Tian Belize had such magical power. He could not help but lower his head. So, the sound of the air breaking was heard again. The two of them jumped in fright, but they saw a flash of green light. An object flew out from the Observe Silence Hall. The dark green light flashed. It was the Dragon Slayer sword. It shot through the air and landed precisely in front of the two of them, stabbed into the ground. Just beside the ice sword, the two swords crossed, trembling nonstop. "You go." Tian Belize's voice returned to calmness. Came from the hall. The coldness was clearly revealed. Kevern quickly answered, pulled Bei, who was still looking at the hall. They retrieved their swords, did not dare to stay any longer, flew away. In the receipt, the disciples saw Tian Belize was angry. They did not dare to breathe, especially Sha Danan. It was the first time he saw Tian Belize's magical power. He was so impressed that he almost forgot about the wound on his chest. His absent-mindedness affected the wound. He cried out ouch in pain. Tian Belize heard Sha Danan's cry of pain, looked at him. Sha Danan gritted his teeth, endured it, lowered his head. Tian Bui glanced at him, but did not say anything, and then looked at the disciples standing in a row at the side. They all lowered their head, did not dare to look at his eyes. Tian Belize sighed deeply, shook his head, held his hands behind his back, and walked to the back hall. Serene looked at her husband's back, then said to the disciples, "You can leave first." The disciples answered. Hidi helped Sha Danan up, then left with the others. When everyone had left Hall of Quietude, Serene walked into the back hall alone. She saw Tian Belize standing in the corridor, staring at the green bamboo in the yard. Suru walked over to her husband's side and said softly, "Why are you so angry today?" Tian Belize shook his head slightly and asked, "When Ling'er and Bei were fighting, Kevern formed an ice wall to block the Dragon Slayer. Did you see it clearly?" Suru sighed and said, "He did not take out the frost sword." Tian Belize snorted, said, "In the last Seven Peaks tournament, Kevern had to use the power of the sword to create the ice wall. I can't believe he has reached this level in just a few decades." At this point, he turned to look at Suru and said, "You were watching from the side just now. What level do you think his cultivation has reached?" Suru said lightly. He was calm when he cast the spell, and he had strength to spare. He has at least reached the 8th level of the Yuqing state. Tian Bai's mouth moved, wanted to speak, but stopped. Suru instead spoke for him. "In Big Bamboo Valley, no one is his match." Tian Belize took a deep look at his wife, then slowly turned his head and looked at the green bamboo in the garden. As winter approached, the bamboo gradually withered and turned yellow. He was lost in thought. After a while, he suddenly asked, "How is 7th?" Suru looked at him, smiled, said, "How else can he be? He was beaten by you, the great immortal, until he vomited blood." Tian Belize stopped for a moment. His short and fat body moved, but he did not turn around. He said lightly, "Tonight, take a yellow pill and go check on him. If he pretend to be dead tomorrow, we won't have anything to eat." Suru smiled and said nothing. Night fell and the sky darkened. Sha Danan slowly returned to his room and opened the door. Ash, who had been following behind him, was the first to rush into the room. Then Big Yella, who had become very close to Ash in just one day, also came in. One monkey and one dog were playing in the room. Woof, 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 and squeak, squeak came one after another. Sha Danan smiled, walked to the table, and sat down. His chest was still aching, but his mind was filled with Tian Bui and the rest's marvelous skills. His heart yearned for it, could not help but sigh. "Why are you sighing out of the blue?" A gentle and calm voice came from the door. Sha Danan was surprised. He turned around and saw it was Shinyang Serene standing at the door. The night wind blew her clothes and hair, making her look like a fairy. He quickly stood up, said Shinyang. Suru walked to him, put her hand on his shoulder, smiled, said, "It's okay, sit down." Sha Danan was flattered, did not dare to disobey, sat down. Suru carefully looked at his face, then put her hand on his chest. She nodded, said, "It's okay, nothing serious." Then she took out a small white bottle, poured out a yellow pill the size of a finger, gave it to Shaw Danon, said, "Take it." Shaw Danon hesitated for a moment, then took it and swallowed it. After a moment, he felt a warm energy rose from his dantian, then spread to his limbs and head. His body was warm and comfortable. Even the pain in his chest was gone. Shaw Danon was surprised and happy. He stood up and moved his body. Everything was normal. The effect of the elixir was incredible. He was happy, quickly said to Suru, "Thank you, Shenyang." Suru nodded with a smile, put away the bottle, sat down on another chair, said, "No need to thank me. It was your master who told me to give you the rhubarb Dan." Shaw Danon, startled, said, "Master doesn't blame me." Suru looked at him, smiled. "He told me to come see you. Of course he doesn't blame you. But I don't know if you blame him." Shaw Danon was surprised, quickly said, "There is no such thing, Shenyang. I would never dare." Suru raised her hand and stopped Shaw Danon's words, said softly, "Xiaofan, listen to me, okay?" Shaw Danon's heart suddenly jumped, whispered, "Yes, Shenyang." Suru said, "During the day your master hit you. It was his fault. I saw it clearly. After he hit you, he regretted it. It's just that his personality." There was a hint of pity on her gentle face as she continued. "It's just that he has always been a headstrong person, and he values his face very much. Even if he has regrets in his heart, he won't say it out loud. Don't resent him." Shaw Danon shook his head, said, "Shenyang, I don't dare to blame Master. I only blame myself for being too stupid, making Master angry." Suru looked at him, sighed. "Actually, it is not your fault. Cultivation of Tao of alchemy, it depends on each person's talent. Although hard work can make up for a lack of talent, but after all, you are still lacking. Your master understands this, but that's not what he's worried about." Shaw Danon was surprised. Then what is master worried about? Suru faintly smiled. Between her brows there was a trace of helplessness, said, "Talented people like Keheo and Bei can only be found by chance and not sought. But now in Xinyan's sect, Big Bamboo Peak is declining day by day. Although your master's cultivation is high, he is often ridiculed by the Sherbua and Shershu because of his disciples. He is a competitive person. His heart is very uncomfortable. He is also worried that after he becomes immortal, Bamboo Peak will never be able to rise again. This will be even more unfair to the ancestors. All these heavy burdens were placed on his shoulders, and his heart was actually very bitter." Shaw Danon was silent. Suru then realized, shook her head, smiled bitterly. "Really? Why am I saying this to a 14-year-old kid?" Then she stood up, patted his shoulder, said, "Rest early." Shaw Danon answered, said, "Yes, Shenyang, take care." Suru nodded, walked out. Shaw Danon walked her to the door, watched Suru's figure disappear, then returned to his room. But when he entered the room, his eyes suddenly brightened. In the room, beside the table, in the flickering light, stood a girl in red dress. Her face was like a lotus, beautiful like a peach. He stared at her. His heart suddenly sped up, quietly said, "Shiji." Chapter 22. This beautiful woman was naturally heedy. She saw Shaw Danon was injured. She was worried and came to visit. She didn't expect her mother was also here, so she hid outside the door until Serene left. Then she saw Shaw Danon was stunned. She said angrily, "What are you doing standing there?" Shaw Danon woke up. His face blushed. He was about to find an excuse to explain, but Heidi lowered her head. Big Yella ran over and rubbed his head against her leg intimately. Heidi bent down, patted Big Yella's head. Big Yella stuck out its tongue, licked her jade-like hand. Ji, the monkey Xiao Huey's voice was heard. Two people and one dog looked over at the same time, only to see Xiao Hui running behind a Huang, pulling its big tail backwards as if trying to pull the Huang away from Tianlinger. Feeling Heidi's surprised eyes, Ash raised its head, suddenly bared its teeth, and made a ferocious face at Heidi. Heidi was not angry. She also made a face at the monkey. Ever since Ash came back with Shaw Danon, he got along well with other people except for her. But when she saw Big Yella, who was always on bad terms with Ash, turn around and did not get angry, but instead played with Ash intimately. She was surprised. What is going on? Hedy pointed at the monkey and dog playing with each other and asked Shaw Danon. Shaw Danon told her about how Ash used the bone to get close to Hedy. Hedy laughed, scolded. Can't believe this damn monkey can do this. Then her eyes turned to Shaw Danon, examined him, said, Right, today my dad hit you. Do you feel uncomfortable? Shaw Danon shook his head. Nothing, Shiji. Hedy was a bit angry, said, Dad is really too much. Why did he take it out on you if he feels uncomfortable? Shaw Danon quickly said, No, it is my stupidity that made Master angry. Hedy glared at him. Shaw Danon could not continue. Hedy snorted, said, Actually, it is not your fault. It is because my dad saw the potential of those two. His mind was not balanced, so he... Halfway through, she looked at Shaw Danon, thought that was saying shitty is stupid, so she changed her words and changed the topic. Why did my mom come here? Shaw Danon honestly said, Shirnyang also came to visit me. She also gave me 2 rhubarb pills. They are very effective. I was cured after eating one. Big yellow pill? Tian Linger seemed to be taken aback. Yes, Shaw Danon raised his head, looked at her, said, What is it? Tian Linger looked at this Shao Shitty a few more times, said, This is my dad's treasure. I heard Mom said it was made by gathering 23 kinds of elixirs. Its effect is amazing. Shi Xiangs, including me, have never had the luck to use it. Shaw Danon opened his mouth. Tian Linger rolled her eyes, said to herself, Could it be that Dad actually treats you differently? But it doesn't look like it. Shaw Danon said, It must be Master's kindness. Seeing I am injured, he gave me elixirs. He is really broad-minded. Tian Linger laughed. My dad is broad-minded. Heh. Never mind, I won't talk to you. Why is there rain? Shaw Danon listened. He could hear the pitter-patter of rain outside the house. Tian Linger walked to the window and pushed it open. A gust of cold mountain breeze immediately blew in, bringing with it the cold raindrops brushing past her face. It was slightly cool. Shaw Danon walked to her, stood next to her, looked outside. It was a quiet and dark night. It was raining. The whole world was dark. His eyes could only see the blurry shadow of the bamboo trimming in the yard. The rain fell from the night sky. In the dark night, in Shaw Danon's eyes, there was a bit of gentleness. He suddenly felt that the night was beautiful. The rain was lingering. Even the sound of the rain hitting on the bamboo leaves was pleasant to hear, rang in his soul. Because beside him, there was a beautiful girl. She lifted her head, with 7 parts youth, 2 parts joy, and even 1 part desolate beauty, staring at him. This rain. Behind him, Big Yella and Ash had quieted down. Big Yella was lazily lying on the bed. Its dog eyes were half closed. Ash also calmed down. It sat next to Big Yella. Its hands were playing with Big Yella's thick and soft fur. The candlelight was flickering in the mountain wind. Occasionally, it made a crackling sound. It's raining. Tian Linger suddenly said quietly. Shaw Danon answered, Yes. Tian Linger stared at the night for a while, then slowly turned around and returned to the table. She said quietly, Shao Fan, close the window. It's a bit cold. Shaw Danon nodded, closed the window. He turned around and saw Tian Linger was absent-mindedly sitting next to the table. She took out a small box, opened it under the candlelight, and looked at it carefully. The candlelight reflected in her charming and bright eyes. It was like 2 balls of gentle but hot flame. You say, is this cooling bead beautiful? Hedy's eyes stopped on the small bead that was emitting a soft glow. Her voice was also drifting, just like Shaw Danon's heart, empty, slowly sinking. He walked over, mustering up all of his courage, using up all of his strength. Only then was he able to make himself look this calm. Tian Linger raised her head and looked at him. She suddenly found this ordinary Shitty's eyes were so bright, even with a trace of passion and pain. Pa, she gently closed the small box, asked softly, Shao Fan, what happened to you? Shaw Danon lowered his head, silent for a moment, then said quietly, I am fine, Tian Linger felt strange, but she did not think too much. She stood up and said, Well, it's late. I should go back. Shaw Danon stood up woodenly. Tian Linger walked a few steps, then suddenly stopped. She turned around and smiled. That beauty hit Shah Danan's heart. Look at my memory, I even forgot what I wanted to do tonight. Then, she took out a thin piece of paper. There were many small words written on it. She handed it to Shah Danan. Shah Danan took it and looked at it. His face changed. He exclaimed, "Pure essence incantation. Shaji, this." Tian Linger rolled her eyes at him, said, "Why are you shouting so loud?" Shah Danan quickly lowered his voice, said, "Shaji, this is the 3rd level incantation." "Me?" Tian Linger snorted, said, "Of course I will pass it to you." Shah Danan was surprised, said, "What?" Tian Linger said, "I know Dad always looked down on you. Today he got angry at you. That is even more ridiculous." He did not teach his disciple well and still scolded you. I can't stand it. You take this incantation and practice it secretly. When you get good results, show it to my dad. Don't embarrass yourself like today." Shah Danan frowned, said, "But Shaji, if Master and Shenyang know about it, won't they scold you?" Tian Linger said impatiently, "You also said scold. At most they will scold me, put me in confinement for a period of time. What about it? Anyway, I will not let you get bullied." Shah Danan's body shook. His heart suddenly warmed. Looking at Tian Linger's figure, he could not say a word. At this moment, his blood was boiling. Even if he had to die for the girl in front of him, he would not hesitate. Tian Linger continued, "You must remember to put in more effort and strive to fight to a draw with that arrogant Lin Jingyu as soon as possible. But no matter how much you train, you'll not be able to match up to Kaheo Shixiao, so don't think about it." Speaking till here, she waved her hand and exhorted, "You must keep it a secret." After speaking, she walked out of the room and disappeared into the darkness. No matter how much you practice, you will not be able to match Kevin Shixiao. This sentence of 13 words, each word heavily hit Shah Danan's heart. His face suddenly lost its color. Subconsciously, he held the white paper in his hand tightly. Mountain rain, heaven and earth solemn. Who can see the young man in the night, walking into the rain, looking up at the sky? Early morning, after the rain, the humid mountain wind blew across Bamboo Peak. Shah Danan came to the familiar kitchen, started a fire to boil water. The firewood crackled in the stove, and the bright yellow flame was like a demon dancing on the wood, reflecting a red glow on his face. Shah Danan took a thin piece of firewood as a fire stick, fiddled with the firewood, lost in thought. No matter how much you practice, you will not be able to match Kevin Shixiao. This sentence, he had repeated it thousands of times in his heart. Every time he read it, it hurt his heart. He knew it was silly. Shaji did not mean any harm. She just said the truth that everyone knew. But he couldn't help thinking, desperately thinking, as if there was a wild flame burning in his heart, incessantly burning his soul, until the flame burned his hand. Ouch! Shah Danan screamed and jumped back. When he was lost in thought, the fire burned the firewood in his hand and burned his hand. He held his hand and blew at the wound, then ran to the water vat and soaked his hand in the cold water. Shah Danan smiled bitterly. What he needed the most now was not a fire stick. Woo, woo, woo. Several barks came from the door. Shah Danan could tell it was Big Yellow's barking, but he did not understand why the usual woof, woof, woof turned into woo, woo, woo. He walked out of the door to take a look and couldn't help but laugh. De Huang and Xiao Hui were fighting. It was biting a short black stick in its mouth, and the other end of the stick was grabbed by Xiao Hui. Both parties were arguing, and De Huang was calling out, but with the stick in its mouth, it was unclear and became a strange woo-woo-woo sound. Shah Danan walked forward, grabbed the stick, and waved Ash and Big Yellow away. But they were not willing. Woof, 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 and zhi kept barking. Shah Danan waved his hand and threatened, "Go away. Don't mess around here, or else I won't give you lunch." Big Yellow and Ash looked at each other. One roared, the other made a face. Then Ash jumped onto the dog's back. Big Yellow carried it and swaggered away from Shah Danan with contempt. Shah Danan was annoyed. After cursing at the two beasts, Shah Danan turned around and went into the kitchen. Then he realized that the stick in his hand was the strange black stick from the trip to the deep valley half a year ago. Ash must be naughty and took it out from the corner to play with Big Yellow. Sha Danon sighed. Suddenly an idea came to his mind. He quickly walked to the stove and fiddled with a black stick like a fire stick. It was very convenient. He did not know what material the stick was made of. It could not be burned by fire and did not transfer heat. After a long time, it was still cool. Sha Danon nodded. He thought it was just right to use. The pitiful evil faction Elder Blackheart, who had already passed away, if he knew that the sinister orb, which he had painstakingly refined for his entire life, the most valuable treasure of the evil faction which had dominated the world, had actually fallen to the state of being used as a fire stick, he would most probably be so angry that he would come back to life and die again from his grave. At noon, Bamboo Peak people were sitting in the dining hall. Tion Belize was the last to enter. He sat on the seat and looked at the disciples. When his eyes fell on Sha Danon, he stopped. Sha Danon lowered his head. Tion Belize looked away. Yesterday you all saw it, Tion Belize said lightly. Everyone was silent. Only Xavion smiled. Yes, Master showed his power and punished those two. Bullshit, Tion Be suddenly shouted. His voice shook the whole place. Everyone kept quiet out of fear. Tion Be angrily said. Yesterday's matter, you all should have seen the profound cultivation of the Xixiang of other branches, not to mention that Kevern, even the little guy who just entered for 3 years, actually defeated most of you, ran to Bamboo Peak, and acted wildly. Do you know that? Everyone was silent. Only Sha Danon suddenly raised his head. Tion Belize said coldly, 7 Peaks tournament is coming. You useless people, from today on, all of you should go into closed-door training. If you don't come out, I will skin you. Everyone's face was bitter, but no one dared to say a word. Hede carefully asked, Dad, I will. You too, Tion Belize said decisively. Hede pursed her lips and was about to speak, but was secretly pulled back by her mother. She turned and looked at Serene. The words that were about to come out of her mouth were swallowed back. Tion Belize's voice echoed in hall of observed silence. From now on, except for 7th, who is responsible for food, all of you are not allowed to go out for 1.5 years. Go into closed-door training, understand? Just like that, time passed quickly. Under the tranquil atmosphere of Big Bamboo Peak, a layer of unprecedented tension enveloped it. All the disciples were concentrating on practicing their skills, except for a leisurely yellow dog, a mischievous gray monkey, and a bored chef. Chapter 23. Woof, woof, woof. Creak, 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 creak. Dog barks and monkey screams mixed together, echoing in Mount Jadian's Bamboo Peak, breaking the tranquility. Sha Danon, holding the black fire stick, rushed out of the kitchen, angry. Damn dog. Damn monkey. If you have the guts, don't run. Ash jumped onto Big Yellow's back. Big Yellow, who was already prepared, ran away. Sha Danon couldn't catch up. He could only watch Ash make a face and put a delicious meat bone into Big Yellow's mouth. Big Yellow was so excited that if it weren't for the 2 rows of teeth biting into the meat bone, his teeth would have already fallen off from his smile. Ooh! Sha Danon angrily walked back to the kitchen with a face of frustration. Since he was 14 years old, he was in charge of the kitchen. His cooking skills made everyone look at him in a new light. Even with Big Yellow's enlightened old dog cultivation, he couldn't help but drool over the delicious food in Sha Danon's hands. Especially the meat bone that Sha Danon used to make the soup. But Sha Danon's soup is for people to drink. Even though Big Yellow's age is older, Tion Belize raised him since he was young, he still couldn't get the treatment he deserved. Until he became familiar with Ash, the scene above often appeared in Bamboo Peak for 2 years. No matter how well Sha Danon hid the meat bone, with Big Yellow's nose and Ash's agility, the fight for the meat bone often ended with Sha Danon's loss. 2 years passed quickly. In fact, it was only 1.5 years. Sha Danon had grown into a 16-year-old boy. He was now half a head taller than his Shiji Hede. During this period of time, because of Tion Belize's strict order, all of Bamboo Peak's disciples closed their doors and trained hard. Except for the 6th disciple Amandla, only Sha Danon the cook had the most leisure time. For 2 years, without anyone noticing, Sha Danon had been practicing by himself. What he couldn't believe was, according to Xavion's incantation, he only used a year's time to finish Yuqing level 2. Lianqi. He had doubts in his heart, but in the end he did not ask Tian Bui and Xavion. Tian Linger and the rest had been concentrating on their closed-door training and had no time to care about his matters. His best friend Du Baishu also went down the mountain, so he could only hide this question in his heart. But following that, there was a big difficult matter placed in front of him. Tian Linger privately gave him the 3rd level of the incantation. He was very clear that this was a big violation of the sect rules, but every night when he was alone, standing in the small courtyard and looking up at the night sky, he would always think of a sentence. No matter how much you train, you still can't compare to Qi Hao Shi Xiao. After 10 nights, he began to practice the 3rd level of the incantation. In pure essence, Yu Qing level 1 to 3 is the foundation of all the incantation. The difficulty is also getting higher. Different from the first 2 levels, Draw Qi and Lianqi, the 3rd level of incantation, energy, focuses on cultivating Tai Chi energy. The incantation said, Tai Chi energy combine 3 into 1. Ji the center, Yuan the beginning, travel in the 12 stars. This yin and yang combined, Qi in the sun, the one who transforms all things. Note, from Han Shu, LV Li Ji in the Jadian, when the disciples reached this realm, there would be a clear dividing line. The level of aptitude could be seen at a glance. The intelligent people would often be like a hot knife cutting through butter, breaking through to the higher realm of actuation, from then on laying a solid foundation for the cultivation of immortality, while the slightly inferior disciples would often stagnate. There were also many who wasted their entire lives. Sha Danan had been in the sect for 5 years. Naturally, he had heard these things many times during his conversations with his Shixiaos, but it was very clear that all of his Shixiaos put him in the slightly inferior category. He returned to the kitchen, went to the stove, filled it with water, then continued to add firewood to the stove, preparing to boil some water. The bright yellow flame burned brightly again. Sha Danan took the poor black fire stick that he had used for 2 years, fiddled with the firewood in the stove. After the fire had stabilized, his eyes slowly fell on the fire stick in his hand. But it was not because he found something, it was a very normal thing. He was dazing. Apart from the bead on its head, the black fire stick was only about a foot long. The only unusual thing was that under the blackness of the fire stick, there were faint blood veins, especially at the point where the short fire stick and the bead met. Sometimes, it almost looked like the 2 objects were fused together with human blood. Sha Danan's body suddenly shivered. The thought of human blood connecting made him feel disgusted. Over the years, he had slowly forgotten about that trip to the secluded valley. Occasionally, he would dream of that strange experience in the middle of the night, and when he woke up, he would be drenched in sweat. At that time, he felt very lonely, alone facing the unknown ferociousness, alone facing the dark death. Every time at that time, he could not control his inexplicable emotion with a trace of fanatical impulse, could not help but have the feeling of killing. Even in the darkness, he remembered many years ago, Posey Monk looked at him at the edge of the ruined grass temple, the strange fanaticism in his eyes. Sha Danan did not know why he had such a strange feeling, but fortunately he had a way to calm his frightened heart. Fawn wisdom. This set of supreme Buddhist incantation had the miraculous effect of suppressing evil spirits and cleansing one's mind. He had practiced it for 5 years, and its biggest use was to suppress the strange emotions that had inexplicably appeared in the past 2 years. Pa Sha Danan's head felt pain. Something fell on the ground. It was a pine cone. Sha Danan's anger rose. He turned around and shouted, "Damn monkey, don't let me catch you." You are, ah? 6 Shixiao. Sha Danan jumped up and saw a person standing at the door, medium build, capable face, full of smile, carrying a small bag on his back. If it is not a Manla, who else could it be? A Manla looked at Sha Danan up and down. His mouth said, "Amazing. Only a few years' time, you have grown as tall as me." Sha Danan quickly walked up, grabbed a Manla's shoulder, smiled. 6 Shixiao, why were you gone for so long? We all missed you. Amandla smiled. Am I not back now? Sha Danan immediately asked. Master and Shenyang know you were back? Amandla said, No, I just came back and saw smoke in the kitchen, so I came to check. I knew you were working here. Haven't seen me for a few years. Did you miss me? Shah Danan was happy, nodded. Amandla touched his head, suddenly whispered, Come, accompany me to see Master. Shah Danan was startled, said, Why do you need me to accompany you? Du Baishu, with a bitter face, said, At that time, when teacher let me go down a mountain, we agreed on a 1-year limit, but I played too much, I searched for more than half a year before I found good materials to refine magical weapon. I am afraid I will be scolded by teacher. Come with me. Shah Danan stared at him, said, Then why did you say you came to see me first, right 6 Shi Xiang? What esper are you crafting? Amandla laughed dryly. Of course I came to see you first, Xiao Shidi, let's go. Then he pulled Shah Danan away. After a while, De Huang, who was hiding in a corner gnawing on a bone, and Xiao Hui, who was scratching lice on its back, at the same time heard an angry roar from Observe Silence Hall. Unfilial people, I am so angry. Dinner time. For the first time in 2 years, the Bamboo Peak people gathered together and ate at the same table. After everyone sat down, Tian Bai's face was still full of anger. After the disciples finished greeting Du Baishu, they could not help but quietly ask him, Lao Lu, why did Master get so angry when he saw you? Amandla was embarrassed, looked around, and Shah Danan, who was sitting next to him, had a smile on his face, but did not dare to laugh out loud, looked quite strange. At this time, Hidi, who was sitting opposite, finally could not help but ask Tian Belize, Dad, 6 Shi Xiang finally came back. Why are you still so angry? Amandla quietly looked at Tian Belize. Tian Belize stared at him. Scared, Amandla quickly lowered his head. Tian Belize snorted, said, Old 6, show us your esper. Du Baishu opened his mouth, but could not say anything. He looked up at Shenyang Suru. Suru smiled and said, Baishu, why don't you take it out for everyone to see, and also let everyone know why your teacher is angry? Du Baishu saw that he could not delay it anymore, slowly took his little bundle, shook it twice, took out a few things from the middle, and put it on the table. Everyone stared without blinking, afraid to miss something. In the dining hall, it was extremely quiet. On the dining table, there were 3 objects that seemed to be made of some kind of hardwood. They were about the size of half a fist and had 6 sides. They were completely white, and there were all kinds of engravings on them. They were 3 dice. Everyone was dumbstruck, speechless. After a moment, they burst into laughter. Amandla's face was red. Tian Belize looked at him. His face was angry, said, Rottenwood cannot be carved. Serene smiled and shook her head, said, Never mind, this is not a big deal. Dice it is. Anyway, this esper is for his own use. Tian Belize stared at his disciple, said to Serene, How do you know he is not using this to cheat? Amandla was shocked, quickly said, Master, Shenyang, disciple would not dare to do such a shameless thing. Just that last year, I found 1,000 years old 3 pearls tree. Note 1. At the Southern Chi River, it is full of spiritual energy. I used its essence to carve these 3 dice, completely on a whim, never thought of other. Tian Belize was still angry, said, Are you happy? Humph, I don't care if you practice other things, but now you have created a gambling tool. Wait until the 7 Peaks tournament in a month. When you show up on the stage, do you think I will still have face? Amandla did not dare to say anything. Serene shook her head, whispered, Bai, this is what he likes. Don't force him. You still remember 1 Shi Xiao. Tian Bei suddenly shook, turned and looked at Suru. Suru lightly sighed, said to Du Baishu, Baishu, you know me and your teacher have never forced you all to be like the other Shi Xiang of other branches to train in celestial sword, but magical weapon often has a lot to do with. You all must be careful. Amandla peeked at Tian Belize, saw his master was not happy, sulking. He did not dare to say more, nodded, Yes, yes. Sura looked at her husband again, then said to the crowd, Time really flies. The 7 Peaks tournament will be held next month. At that time, we will go together to Tong Tian Peak where the main sect is located. You should prepare early. Speaking till here, her beautiful and gentle face suddenly became solemn. She quickly said, This time, Don't let me and your master down, understand? The disciple's heart jumped, said in unison, Yes, Mas, Shernyan. Among the loud answer, an uncoordinated, weak voice came out. Serene looked and saw it was the seventh Sha Dan and frowned. What is it, Xiao Fan? Sha Danan said carefully. So you mean I should go too? Suru was startled, glanced at Tian Bui. A smile appeared on her face, said, Yes. Aren't you also a Big Bamboo Valley disciple? Sha Danan was overjoyed, cheered, and high-fived Amanla. He did not care about Tian Bui's cold words from afar, said, There are 9 spots anyway. Even if we give one to an idiot, it is still a waste of one. It is a waste not to use it. At night, Sha Danan returned to his room and saw Big Yella, and Ash had already gone to his bed to rest. Since 1.5 years ago, because Big Yella and Ash were good friends, they also moved into Sha Danan's room to sleep. At first, it surprised Tian Belize. He could not find his beloved dog anywhere. Then he snorted and left without saying anything. Sha Danan saw his master did not blame him, so he did not kick Big Yella out. In fact, he could not. Big Yella took up half of the bed. Ash took up half of the other half. One could imagine the master's mood. But after a long time, maybe he got used to it, Sha Danan no longer complained about Big Yella and Ash sleeping with him. That night, his mood was very good. He went into the room and sat at the table. He saw Big Yella was lazily lying on the table. Ash had gone to the kitchen and stole his black fire stick, rubbing it against Big Yella. He felt that Xiao Hui seemed to be very interested in this fire stick, but he was not in the mood to think too much about it. His heart was filled with joy because his master unexpectedly allowed him to participate in the 7 Peaks tournament. If Big Yella and Ash looked at Sha Danan, they would see a human with glowing eyes. Sha Danan's eyes were looking at the monkey and dog, but his mouth seemed to be talking to the air. Look, I have the chance to participate in 7 Peaks tournament. That's great. Master is really generous. Even if I am stupid, he still took me there. Ugh, maybe I can see Jingyu. Then, he seemed to think of something, whispered to himself. But if I really go on stage, I'm afraid I will embarrass Master. Never mind, just do what you need to do. Big Yella, Ash, don't you think so? Squeak, 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 squeak. Sha Danan looked up and saw Ash's mind was on Big Yella's fur, carefully picking the lice. It only barked a few times to deal with Sha Danan. Big Yella was even more straightforward. His dog ears were down and did not look at Sha Danan. Stupid dog. Sha Danan cursed angrily. Suddenly, his eyes darkened. Ash suddenly threw the fire stick at him. He was surprised and quickly dodged. The fire stick hit the table, bounced twice, then fell on the ground. Squeak, 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 woof, woof, woof. This time, Big Yellow and Gray Monkey's voice became a symphony. Sha Danan made a face at the 2 animals, then sat down bitterly. For some reason, the heroic appearance of Kevern at Bamboo Peak 2 years ago appeared in his mind. It's a wall of ice, Sha Danan murmured. It was okay when he did not cultivate, but as his cultivation deepened, he realized how difficult it was to reach Kevern's level. He recalled that night Tian Ling was beside the light in this room, her gentle but passionate eyes. His heart felt like it was pricked by a sharp needle at that moment. The fire stick was quietly lying there. Monkey and Yella's laughter came from the side. Sha Danan suddenly felt he was so similar to the fire stick. Even when the fire stick fell on the ground, in his eyes, there was also a bit of loneliness. Sigh, he sighed, tried to imagine the situation where he could reach that level. Then, with a completely relaxed, uncaring posture, for the first time in his life, he did the moving object action that Jade and disciples did countless times. He waved his hand to the fire stick on the ground. That moment seemed to last forever. Sha Danan was very normal, not even a bit sad. He was prepared to accept his failure. Then he saw the fire stick on the ground, moved a little. It was so light, so slight, like waking up from a long sleep, moved a little. Chapter 24. That morning, everyone in Jadian's Bamboo Peak was in high spirits, especially the disciples. Everyone had a smile on their faces. Although there was some nervousness, most of it was drowned in the excitement. Among them, only does Shi Xiang Xavian, number 2 Wu Dei, number 3 Zheng Dali, number 4 Hidaji, as well as number 5 Ladaxin and number 6 Amanla were the new disciples that Tion Belize had accepted in the past few decades. There were also the young Hedi and Shaw Danon, who had never experienced Jadian's grand event that happened once every 60 years. Hedi was the happiest at the moment. While Tion Belize and his wife were making their final preparations, she pestered the most experienced Xavion and kept asking, "Does she Xiang, are there really that many disciples going to Seven Peaks tournament?" Xavion was smiling. He was obviously in a good mood. He said, "That's right. Seven Peaks tournament is the biggest event in Jadian. All houses see it as the most important event. Also, the Xixiang and Shidi who are selected to represent each house are all outstanding people. Needless to say, the scene is spectacular and exciting." At this moment, fourth brother Hidaji heard it. He came over, winked at Hedi, smiled, and said, "Xiao Shimi, you don't know. The Xixiang still has something to say." Hedi said, ignored Xavion's surprised face, asked, "What is it, fourth brother?" Hidaji smiled and said, "At the martial art competition, hundreds of people from the same sect will be watching. The winner will stand on the stage and applaud thunderously. Of course, he will feel proud of himself. But if some of the beautiful new junior sisters from other branches are impressed by eldest Xixiang's elegance and scream and cheer, wouldn't that be a great joy in life?" Speaking up to here, he turned to Song Darren with a serious face and said, "Eldest brother, don't you think so?" Xavion's face suddenly turned red. Hedi saw it and felt it was really strange. She asked, "De Xixiang, why are you suddenly blushing?" Song Darren shook his head like a rattle drum and said, No, I don't have red." Hidaji coughed and saw the other Xixiangs and Shidi had surrounded them. The young ones like Amanla and Shaw Danon were not very familiar, but Wu Dai and Zheng Dali were all smiling. He said, second Xixiang and third Xixiang are also here. Recently my memory is not good. It seems that in the last exam, when the Xixiang won 2 rounds in a row and entered the 3rd round, there was a young and beautiful shimmy from the same faction. I forgot her name. Wu Dai immediately continued, I also don't remember clearly, but I think it was a junior sister from Small Bamboo Valley. Her looks were extremely beautiful, but her name..." Zheng Dali's face was full of smiles as he said, "We've forgotten his name, but we still remember the face of the person who clapped the loudest and exchanged glances with eldest senior brother." Wah! The crowd was in an uproar. Hedi took the lead to interrogate. "The Xixiang, which Shiji from the same faction actually treated you so well?" Xavion's face was full of embarrassment. He stared fiercely at Hidaji, laughed dryly, and said, No such thing. Don't listen to 4 senior brothers' nonsense. Small Bamboo Valley's one-min junior sister was only cheering for us because of Shenyang." Hidaji immediately said, "The Xixiang, this is strange. Me, second Xixiang, and third Xixiang do not know that person's name. Why did you immediately say her name? But speaking of which, Beimin Shiji treats the Xixiang very well." Everyone burst into laughter. Xavion knew that he had made a slip of the tongue, and also knew that his words were far from Hidaji, the most astute person in Big Bamboo Valley. The more he said, the more mistakes he would make. He snorted, used his thick skin, laughed dryly, and said, "Boring person, hee, I'll go see if Master and Shenyang are done." Tion Linger still wanted to ask, but saw Xavion slipping away faster than the wind. In the blink of an eye he disappeared. She could only grab Hidaji, her big watery eyes filled with excitement, said, "Fourth senior brother, quickly tell me, what does that Wenmin's senior sister look like?" Hidaji laughed. "Little Shimmy, don't you often go to Small Bamboo Valley with Shenyang to visit Master Shuiwe? How come you have never seen Beimin Shiji? She is Master Shuiwe's favorite disciple." Hedi shook her head. "When Mother and I go to Small Bamboo Valley, we always go to see Master Shuiwe directly. It is rare to meet a few Shiji from the same faction. Quickly tell me." Hidaji laughed. Don't rush. Today we will go to Peak of Widows to participate in Seven Peaks tournament. You will most likely see her." Hedi said, "Oh." She rolled her eyes, seemed to realize something, said, "No wonder the Xixiang was so energetic when I woke up this morning. It turns out you have ulterior motives." Everyone was startled, then understood and laughed. Hede also laughed. The little bit of nervousness about Seven Peaks tournament had disappeared. Her eyes moved and saw everyone was smiling. Their mood was good. But when she saw Shah Danon, her heart startled. Although Shah Danon had a smile on his face, Hede was the closest to him these years. She could tell he was absent-minded at first glance. While everyone was laughing, Hede secretly pulled Shah Danon aside, whispered, "Shao Fan, what is it?" Shah Danon startled, his mouth moved, his right hand touched his chest, finally said, "I am fine, Shiji." Hede looked at him, said directly, "What is it? Let me see." Shah Danon hesitated for a moment, then took out the item and showed it to Hede. Hede was surprised, said, "Why you carry this black fire stick with you?" Shah Danon saw Hede's surprised face, but even with a little anger in her face, she was still so beautiful. He murmured, "Master's grace, let me also see it. My cultivation is low. I don't have any esper, also don't know how to use." Tian Linger suddenly understood, but couldn't help but laugh. "Ah, ha. So, it's like this. Then you're going to bring this fire stick to the Seven Peaks tournament?" In the 2,000 years of Qingyun sect, it was already strange to have a sixth senior brother who could refine dices and magical weapons. "I didn't expect you actually brought a fire stick. Ha. I'm dying of laughter." The Bamboo Peak disciples heard Hede's laughter. They all came to her and asked her the reason. They couldn't help but laugh again. Shah Danon saw his Shixiangs and Shiji were smiling, but his heart was filled with anger. The anger disappeared in a blink, but it was so strong that it almost suffocated Shah Danon. He lowered his head, held the ugly fire stick tightly. The familiar coldness came to his palm. "Shao Fan." Hede suddenly stopped smiling, said seriously, "I am sorry." Shah Danon's body shook, raised his head. Hede said, "I originally wanted to give you this esper to keep your face so you won't be laughed at by other faction. But these days, Mother forced me to cultivate too hard, so I forgot about it." Shah Danon subconsciously shook his head, said, "Shiji, your cultivation is more important. No need to think about me." Tian Linger patted his shoulder, smiled, and said, "But it's nothing. Everyone knows your ability. This time it's just a chance to broaden our horizons." She lowered her voice. "If anyone bullies you, you must come and tell me. I will help you immediately." Shah Danon looked at his Shiji's kind eyes. He did not doubt her promise at all. He could even feel the kindness of the people around them. But, what kind of emotion was so strong? What kind of fire was burning deep in his heart, making him unable to breathe? Tian Linger was still grinning, patting her favorite junior brother's shoulder, whispered, "Let me tell you, there are a lot of fun places on Tongtian Peak. This time we will secretly run over to play, okay?" Shah Danon's eyes flashed with that beautiful face. Suddenly, he did not dare to look at her face. He lowered his head. His heart was sweet, but also troubled. Young man's heart was filled with all kinds of feelings. He whispered, "Yes, Shiji." Hede smiled. Suddenly, Hidaji said, "Master and Shenyang are here." Everyone turned and saw Tianbelis, and Serene came out from Hall of Observe Silence. Tianbelis was wearing a sky-blue robe. His temperament was quite solemn. If not for his body being a little short and his belly being a little big, he would have the aura of a grandmaster. As for Serene, she made everyone's eyes brighten. She was usually very beautiful. Today, she was wearing a light green dress. Her hair was decorated with a jade flower. Her eyebrows were like distant mountains. Her skin was like white jade. Her eyes were like water. Her red lips were smiling. She was really charming. Xavion followed behind the husband and wife. His face could not be more serious. It was just that as soon as the disciples saw him, they all had strange expressions on their faces, as if they were smiling, yet not smiling. Behind Xavion, the yellow dog Big Yella and the monkey Ash also came out. Ash seemed to be used to sitting on Big Yella's back. When it saw Shah Danon standing in front of it, it called out, jumped down from Big Yella's back, scuttled to Shah Danon's side, and hopped onto Shah Danon's shoulder. Tianbelis looked at the disciples. He nodded and said, "Let's go." Then he waved his right hand. Red light flashed. His famous celestial sword, crimson spirit appeared. The red light shined brightly. It was a celestial treasure. Just as Tion Boli was about to step forward, his trouser leg was suddenly pulled by someone. He looked back and saw that his trouser leg was bitten by the Huang. This yellow dog that he had raised since it was a child was shaking its head and whining. It was biting his trouser leg. Its tail was wagging vigorously, and its pair of dog eyes were staring straight at Tion Boli without blinking. Tion Boli hesitated for a moment and said vaguely, but he still waved his sleeves and rolled up to Huang. Then he floated to the crimson spirit sword, bid farewell to Suru, and flew away. Serene smiled and shook her head. She said to the others, "You guys come too." She paused, then said to Xavion, "Darren, Xiao Fan's cultivation is not enough. You take him away." Chapter 25. Xavion nodded. Yes. Serene nodded. She did not seem to do anything, but a pale green light flashed, as if matching with her clothes, carried her straight into the sky, chasing after Tion Boli's red light. Among the Bamboo Peak disciples, Wu Dei, Zheng Dali, and Ladaxin's cultivation had not reached the 4th level, so they could not control Esper. Xavion walked toward Sha Danan. Hidaji, Amanla, and Hidi each took one and went on their way. Among the crowd, Tion Linger's magical weapon was Amber Vermilion Soul. Hidaji's magical weapon was Landscape Brush, which was in line with his usual habit of loving books. But the funniest was still number 6, Du Baishu's Dice's magical weapon. Once it was activated, a white light flashed. The 3 dices spun and enlarged by 10 times. Spinning nonstop in the air, various kinds of numbers appeared one after another. If talking about the world's gambling tools, there was nothing better than this. 5th brother Ladaxin carefully went forward to take a closer look, bitterly said to Amandla, "6th brother, this thing won't fall from the sky, right?" Amandla raised his eyebrows, smiled, and said, "5th Shixiang, why don't we make a bet? If it falls from the sky, you win, I will." Lu Daxin spat. "Then do I still dare to win this bet?" Amandla, startled, said, "That's true." Xavion walked to Sha Danan, smiled. "Xiao Fan, are you ready?" Sha Danan was about to nod. Suddenly Ash screamed. Both of them were surprised. Ash pointed at the sky, then pointed at itself. Sha Danan was startled, said, "You want to go too?" Ash immediately grinned. Sha Danan hesitated, looked at Xavion. Xavion thought for a moment, smiled. "Since Master is bringing Big Yella, we can also bring Ash." Sha Danan was happy, nodded. Ash was even more happy. Xavion turned to the others. "Let's go, or else Master will scold us if we are late." Everyone answered and left on their Esper. Before Hidi left, she went to Sha Danan and said, "Be careful. Hold on to Shixiang." Sha Danan nodded, said, "Understood, Shiji." Tion Linger smiled at him, and with a spell, the amber vermilion silk glowed and broke through the air. Song Darren immediately took out his magic treasure, the 10 tigers. He was the eldest disciple of Big Bamboo Peak, even though the other disciples cultivated different magical weapons. But he still cultivated the immortal sword. The 10 tigers' immortal sword was yellow in color. It was 4 feet long and 3 fingers wide. Among the immortal swords, it was relatively large. Unfortunately, the power of a magic treasure could not be measured by its size. Xavion pulled Sha Danan up. Sha Danan had the experience of riding on Hidi's phoenix soul. The 10 tigers under his feet sank, then steadied. He was no longer in a panic. But Ash seemed to know something and held Sha Danan's head tightly. Song Darren smiled and said, "Little brother, let's go." Then he pointed to the sky with his right hand. The 10 tigers' sword made a low, vibrating sound. The sword that was floating 1 foot above the ground suddenly rose 3 feet. Sha Danan subconsciously held on to Xavion. At this moment, a gust of wind blew. The tip of the 10 tigers' sword slowly rose up. Sha Danan had to hold on to Xavion to avoid falling. Then, with a sharp whistle, the 10 tigers flew straight up into the sky. Sha Danan stood on the sword and held on to Xavion tightly. Although he was nervous, he could not bear to close his eyes. The green peak of Bamboo Peak was getting farther and farther away from him. Suddenly, Everything in front of him was white. They had passed through the thick white clouds. He could not see anything clearly. There were clouds all around him. The wind was howling, hurting his face. Shah Danan's body was trembling, half nervous, half excited. Galloping in the blue sky, what a dream! The cloud sea was vast. After traveling for a long time, when Shah Danan's heart was about to calm down, it seemed like something was going to surprise him again. 10 tigers rushed out of the cloud sea with a sharp whistling sound. That boundless blue sky was like the deep sea hanging upside down. It was so blue that it was almost pure, boundless, magnificent, and majestic. When they rushed out of the sea of clouds, the white clouds under their feet were like water splashes. They followed their momentum and created long clouds, as if they were reluctant to leave, but also like the slight waves of a great river. They floated in mid-air and then slowly fell back down, returning to the sea of clouds. The sky was clear as the 10 tigers' immortal swords soared into the sky until it was almost 3,000 feet above the boundless sea of clouds. Only then did Song Darren lay the sword flat and began to head straight for the peak of Tongtian. In the distance, there was a majestic mountain that towered into the clouds. No, towering into the sky, standing proudly. There, among the white clouds, a faint bell sound echoed in the sky. Peak of Widows, like it really leads to the blue sky. Shah Danan held his breath. Under the endless blue sky, next to the mountain, there were countless lights of different colors. The closer they got to Peak of Widows, the denser the lights became. Shah Danan knew those were the espers used by Jadian disciples. Because of the 5 elements, the espers had different colors. It was very beautiful. However, these rays of light were like raindrops falling from the sky, rushing toward the mountain peak. The scene was spectacular. Together with the 10 tigers' celestial swords, they quickly blended into the colorful torrent. With a whistling sound, Xavion and Shah Danan landed on a large square. Ash looked around, then jumped down for Shah Danan's shoulder and jumped around the square excitedly. Shah Danan did not care about it. He saw the square was made of white jade, surrounded by immortal energy. In the center of the square, there were 9 cauldrons arranged in groups of 3. The most surprising thing was above the square, the clouds were rising. It was like walking in the clouds, making people feel like they had become immortals. Shah Danan felt it was very familiar. He remembered this place was the Cloud Sea in Jadian's 6 sceneries when he first came to Mount Jadian. After 5 years, this place was still the same. There was no change, still beautiful and ethereal, but today it was much more lively than 5 years ago. The square was very lively. The disciples from Jadian who came to participate in 7 Peaks tournament had temporarily stopped here. Looking from afar, there were at least hundreds of people. Most of the people standing in the square were wearing Jadian clothing. There were Taoists and commoners, male and female. Among them, there were many people of the younger generation, full of heroic spirit. It could be seen that Jadian had been working hard to cultivate the younger disciples. Although there were hundreds of people standing in the square, it was still very spacious. Xavion looked around and suddenly heard a clear voice shouting, "De Xixiang, we are here." Xavion and Shah Danan looked at the direction. It was the Bamboo Peak disciples. Needless to say, it was Hede. They were standing next to a large cauldron in the middle of the square. Hede was waving her hand at them. Xavion answered, then walked over with Shah Danan. On the way, Shah Danan looked around and saw the disciples of other houses were standing together in groups. They seemed to be talking about something excitedly. They were all looking forward to the upcoming tournament. They came to the front. Hidaji, who was standing behind Hede, said first, "De Xixiang, was the journey smooth?" Xavion smiled. "It is not the first time I have come here. What else can happen?" Hede looked at Shah Danan, smiled. "Xiao Fan, how is the scenery on the road?" Shah Danan recalled the breathtaking scenery in the blue sky, said sincerely, "Very beautiful." Hede giggled, patted his shoulder, said, "You should work harder in the future. Wait until you have forged an esper and learned how to fly in the air. Then you can fly to the blue sky every day and see it to your heart's content." Shah Danan did not say anything, but smiled and nodded heavily. Xavion looked around, asked Hidaji, "Fourth Shitty, where are Master and Shenyang?" Hidaji said, "The few of us followed Master and Shenyang here. The Taoist brother who received us led Master and Shenyang up to the clear Jade Monastery, saying that the 7 branches' first elders wanted to have a meeting to discuss some details of the martial arts competition. Master told us to wait here." Xavion nodded, then waved his hand and called the Shitty to his side. He looked around, lowered his voice. "Why do I feel there are so many unfamiliar Xixiang from other houses? You have been here for a while. Is there any news?" Hidaji shook his head, said, "I also have the same feeling. It seems the houses have accepted a lot of new people these years." Second disciple Wu Dei looked around, said, "There are a lot of new people, but I think the ones who will go on stage tomorrow will be the Xixiangs with high cultivation. After all, the cultivation experience is still theirs." Xavion suddenly sighed, said, "Second Shitty, it may not be so. Do you still remember the young disciple Bei from Dragonhead Peak 2 years ago?" Wu Dei startled, then became silent. Everyone looked at each other. No one said anything. Only Sha Danan's heart suddenly had a complicated feeling, like joy, like envy, and also a little bit of jealousy. "Who does that guy think he is?" Suddenly someone said coldly. Everyone was surprised. The person who spoke was Tianlinger. Her pretty face was slightly flushed, her beautiful eyes opened wide. Hatefully said, "If he does not come to participate in the tournament, then it's fine. If he dares to come, it's best if he meets me. At that time, I will decide the winner with him." The Bamboo Peak people looked at each other. Sixth disciple Amanla had always been quick-witted. He reacted quickly and said, "Xiao Shimi is right. If there really is such a coincidence, fellow Xixiangs, why don't we make a bet to see who will win and who will lose? Go, go, go." Fifth disciple Adaxon, who was standing next to him, kicked him away. Xavion smiled and was about to say something. Suddenly he heard a light cough behind him. A woman said softly, "Song Xixiang, long time no see." Xavion suddenly felt like he was hit by a heavy blow. Chapter 26. Xavion was stunned for a moment. The voice lingered in his ears, like celestial music. The next moment, as if he awoke from a dream, he turned around like lightning, saw 5 or 6 female disciples standing behind him. Looking at their attire, they were from small bamboo valley which only accepted female disciples in Qinyan sect. The first person to step out and face them was a beautiful woman with an oval face. Her hair was like the clouds, and her skin was like snow. She had a faint smile on her face. Sha Danan looked at the girl and was about to ask which house's Shiji she is from. But when he turned around, he saw Wu Dei, Zheng Dali, and Hidaji all had a strange smile on their faces. Then he looked at Xavion and saw the usually smart and capable de Xixiang was smiling dumbly, not knowing what to say. He thought about it for a moment and guessed the woman's identity. Sure enough, Hidaji and others were waiting to watch a good show, but Xavion suddenly fell into a state of stupidity. Not only the Bamboo Height disciples could not stand his stupidity, even the female disciples from Bamboo Height were covering their mouths and laughing. The beautiful girl standing in front of Xavion blushed, said quietly, "Song Xixiao." Before Xavion could react, the impatient Hidaji said, "Haha, Bako Shiji, you and I haven't seen each other for many years. How have you been?" Bako looked at the skinny man for a moment, then smiled. "This is Hidaji, Xixiao." Hidaji nodded. "That is me. When Shiji has a good memory, you and I only met once 60 years ago, but you still remember me. I am flattered." One man smiled and said, "He's seen your brother fought against a strong opponent in the last competition and showed off his skills. Of course I remember." Hidaji's face turned red. In the last 7 Peaks tournament, he met a master from Peak of Widows in the first round. Although he tried his best, he still lost. But he was a smart person. He smiled and said, "Let's not talk about the past. My cultivation is shallow. Compared to when Shiji and our Xixiang, I am far behind. Speaking of which, ever since the last examination, our eldest senior brother has been constantly thinking about you." Wenmin blushed but did not reply, only glanced at Xavion from the corner of her eyes, but the younger junior sisters behind her were already laughing. Song Darren was a big man, but at this moment, he was embarrassed like a shy teenager. He quickly said, No, when did I what? Before he could finish, he was interrupted by a young lady behind Wenmin. So you don't miss our Wenmin senior sister anymore? Xavion's heart jumped, secretly glanced at Wenmin. Wenmin was also looking at him. A pair of beautiful eyes did not even blink. He was anxious and blurted out, No, it's not like that. I'm worried about. Huh? Big Bamboo Valley and Small Bamboo Valley disciples roared with laughter, especially the few young ladies behind Wenmin. Their laughter was especially bright and loud, causing the disciples from other houses nearby to look over. Hidaji waited for the laughter to subside, sternly said to the Small Bamboo Valley disciples, Dear senior sisters, actually our eldest senior brother's meaning is like this. It's not that he doesn't miss Wenmin's senior sister, but he also doesn't miss her all the time. Then what is it? A Small Bamboo Valley female disciple laughed loudly and asked. Hidaji glanced at that girl, smiled, and said, He remembered Wenmin's senior sister once after a while, said her name again after a while. That's why he said he doesn't miss her all the time. The crowd laughed. Xavion stared fiercely at Hidaji, but the corner of his eyes looked at Wenmin, saw a smile at the corner of her mouth, but did not seem to be angry. He could not help but secretly felt happy, but his mouth muttered, Wenmin Jr. sister, they just love to joke you don't mind them. Wenmin smiled, turned her head, and first stopped those junior sisters who were trembling with laughter behind her, and then looked deeply at him, said, Then what do you think in your heart? Xavion's face was bitter. His mouth said, I a few times, but could not say anything. Looking at him like this, those few girls could not help but laugh again. Wenmin shook her head, glared at him, ignored him, walked to Tian Linger, held her white jade-like palm, looked at her carefully, said, You are Linger Jr.'s sister, right? Tian Linger curiously said, Yes. Wenmin's senior sister, how do you know me? Wenmin smiled and said, You often follow Surusu teacher uncle to our Small Bamboo Valley to visit teacher. We already know you. We haven't seen each other for a few years. You have really grown more and more beautiful. Tian Linger held Wenmin's hand, smiled, said, Not at all. How can I compare to Wenmin Shiji's flower-like appearance? Then she lowered her voice, whispered to Wen Shiji, Maeda Shi Xiang is head over heels for you. Wen Shiji. Wenmin glanced at Xavion. Xavion immediately revealed a silly smile. She shook her head, whispered, That Shi Xiang of yours is really a blockhead. Tian Linger, Pooch laughed out, immediately felt that she regretted not meeting this senior sister Wenmin earlier. Immediately Wenmin gently pulled. Tian Linger followed her to the middle of the Small Bamboo Valley women. After chatting for a while, they immediately became familiar with each other. Cheers and laughter from time to time came out from the group of women, leaving Xavion and the rest to one side. Xavion stood at the side, wanted to go up and talk to Wenmin, but did not know what to say, so he just stood there. Not to mention others, even Sha Danon saw this. He also shook his head. At this moment, Sha Danon suddenly heard Amanla exclaimed, So many people are coming. Sha Danon felt strange, turned to look, his body suddenly shook. A group of people, about 30 people, all dressed in white, full of heroic spirit. In other words, it is not wrong to say they are arrogant. But the people in front are not ordinary, especially the person at the front. White like snow, handsome and elegant. If not that Kevern, who else could it be? Kevern. Sha Danon stared at the group of people, repeated this name in his heart. At the same time, he heard fourth Shi Xiang Hidaji suddenly laughed, whispered, Dragon Head Peak really has a lot of people. Kevern also saw the bamboo height people. Immediately came over, the people behind him also followed. He saluted Xavion, smiled, Song Shi Xiang, you and I meet again. Xavion did not dare to neglect, returned the salute. Shi Xiang, you also came. Did you participate in this examination? Kevern smiled. Originally, I did not want to participate, but my master thought I still need more practice, so he ordered me to participate. So, I shamelessly took one of the spots. Xavion nodded, smiled. That is good. With Shi Xiang's talent, this time the winner is definitely you. Kevern shook his head, modestly said, Not at all. Song Shi Xiang flatters me. While they were talking, Sha Danon opened his eyes wide, searching behind Kevern. Sure enough, After a moment, he saw Bei, who was standing behind Kevern, was also looking around, apparently also looking for something. Their eyes met, extremely happy, walked out at the same time, held each other's hand, like they have thousands of words to say, but could not say them. After a long time, Bei said, "Xiao Fan, did you participate in this examination?" Sha Dana nodded, smiled. "Yes, my master is very good to me. Let me participate. What about you?" Bei said, "I also participated. What's so good about that short master of yours? 2 years ago when I went to your place, he treated you like that." Sha Dana quickly said, "No, he is not like that usually. That day he was just angry." Bei and his good friend rarely met again, did not want to let these boring topics disturb their mood. He changed the topic, smiled. "You brat, haven't seen you for 2 years. You have grown so tall." Sha Danan punched him, laughed. "What? Only you can grow, I can't." Bei laughed. The two of them were talking. This time, there were no teachers around. They could say whatever they want. Others did not care about them. While they were talking, Sha Danan inadvertently looked back and saw Kevern had seen Heidi, Baymin, and other girls standing at the side. He went to greet them. His heart felt pain. Even his face changed. Bei saw it, surprised. "What's wrong, Xiao Fan?" Sha Danan shook his head, forced a smile. "Nothing." Although he said so, his eyes were still looking at Kevern. Kiheo had already walked in front of Tian Linger and Wen Min. He first smiled and greeted Tian Linger, said, "Tian, junior sister, do you still remember me?" Tian Linger had been happily chatting with Wen Min and the rest of the small bamboo height disciples. Seeing Kiheo suddenly appear, for some reason, her face blushed. Her voice also became soft. "Yes, Qi Shi Xiang, hello." Looking from afar, Heidi's beautiful face was slightly red. Her big watery eyes were like a dream. But this beautiful face reflected in Sha Danan's eyes. It was like a knife cutting his heart. "Xiao Fan, what's wrong with you? Why your face suddenly became so white?" Bei did not understand, asked with concern, "Are you sick?" "No, it's okay, I am fine," Sha Danan said quietly. From afar, Bayman's mind was very sensitive. Seeing Heidi's face, she knew what was going on. She said to Kevern, "Qi Shi Xiang, why do you only recognize Tian Shimi? You don't even care about us Bamboo Heights sisters?" After she said that, the girls behind her started to jeer. Kevern quickly said, "What is Wen Shiji saying? How can I dare to neglect Bamboo Heights Shiji?" Bayman laughed lightly. "Qi Shi Xiang is participating in 7 Peaks tournament again. I guess you're determined to win?" Kevern's eyes flashed. He said, "When Shiji passed 3 rounds in a row in the last exam, but lost to Xiao Yikai Shixiang of the main gate. It's a pity. Most likely after 60 years of intensive training, plus Shuiwen Master's meticulous nurturing, now with Small Bamboo Valley's #1 expert status, must be aiming for this great examination laurel." Bayman smiled. I don't dare. How can I compete with Qi Shixiao? Also, the title of Bamboo Heights #1 Master is not something I can afford. Chapter 27. Kevern frowned. "When Shiji, you are too polite." Wen Min smiled and said, "That's not true. My teacher Master Shui Yue is an extremely knowledgeable person. My aptitude is not good. I cannot receive her teachings. Our branch has other talented sisters. Qi Shixiang must be careful." Kevern's eyes brightened, but his face was still smiling. "That's even better. To be able to defeat Wen Shiji, he must be a rare genius. I really want to meet him soon." Wen Min chuckled, nodded, and did not say more, pulled Tian Linger, who was reluctant to part, and walked to the side. At that moment, a scream came from above the square. The sound was like thunder, shaking the whole square. Hundreds of Qingyun disciples in the square all looked up, only to see a red light shooting over. In a moment it stopped above the square. A red celestial sword emitted rays of celestial qi. Lying horizontally in the square, on it stood a Taoist priest of Peak of Tongtian. He said loudly to the disciples standing in the square, "Shi Xiangs, head of faction, and all the heads of faction have ordered the Shi Xiangs who are participating in the 7 Peaks tournament to come to Crystal Hall." The wind blew, the white clouds floated. The hundreds of Jadian disciples on the square stirred. Then people came out and walked toward the front of the square. Shah Danan thought those disciples with high cultivation would fly away with their esper, but none of them seemed to have the intention to do so. They were walking honestly. He and Lin Jingyu walked together, looked to the left and right, saw Tian linger, small bamboo valley Min, and the other girls walking together, all smiles, seemed to be in a good mood. Xavion and the rest of the big bamboo valley disciples followed behind them. As for the Dragon Head Peak faction, 7 or 8 people walked out from Kevern's group. At this moment, they walked to another place and greeted the disciples of the other factions. Especially Kevern. He was familiar with the names of the other factions and greeted them. The other faction's disciples also smiled and greeted him. It seemed like they had a wide circle of friends. Qi Shixiang is very good at making friends. Noticing Shah Danan's eyes were on Kevern, Bei, who was walking next to him, said, "His cultivation is high, and he is trusted by Master Vasp Kalo, so in Jadian, everyone gives him face." Shah Danan listened, his face expressionless, only slowly nodded. At the end of the square, it is the Rainbow Bridge of Jadian's 6 sceneries. Shah Danan and Bei walked through this place when they were rescued to Mount Jadian 5 years ago. Now that they revisited this place, they couldn't help but sigh. Stepping onto the Rainbow Bridge's uncanny workmanship, looking at the clear water flowing down from both sides of the bridge, it was still refracting the illusory and beautiful 7-colored rainbow. 5 years ago, the 2 youths who did not know the ways of the world were now Qing Yun's sect disciples. Walking at the back of the crowd, Lin Jingyu suddenly let out a low sigh. 5 years. Shah Danan was silent, only walking forward. The scenery in front of him was the same as before. As the Rainbow Bridge rose, the white clouds gradually fell under his feet, and the blue sky was clear as if it had been washed. "Why don't you use your sword?" Shah Danan suddenly asked. Bei was slightly surprised, said, "Don't you know us disciples are not allowed to use sword near Peak of Widow's main hall? I heard Kao Shixiang said before. First, it is to show respect to the main sect. In the holy land of Crystal Monastery, we have to walk up. Second, I heard that when our Qing Yun sect was first established, Qing Yun founder, in order to protect this place, set up an extremely powerful prohibition at the peak of Tong Tian Peak called Zhu Xian Sword Formation. Anyone who flies above Tong Tian Peak without permission will be killed by the Zhu Xian Sword Formation." Shah Danan was surprised, said, "No wonder there are so many masters, but none of them use sword. Right? Is that Retribution Sword Formation powerful?" Bei looked at the tall mountain in front of him, said, "I have not seen it, but it must be very powerful. I heard that this Zhu Xian Sword Formation was passed down from Qing Yun founding master, and 1,000 years ago, Qing Yun founding master once again perfected it. Its power was unparalleled. From then on, no one dared to come to our Qing Yun hill and behave atrociously." Shah Danan followed his eyes and looked at the tall mountain, sighed, "So powerful." The 2 of them talked as they walked, following the dozens of people across the Rainbow Bridge. On the way, Shah Danan looked at the young elites of Jadian. Among the 60 people, most of them were male. There were only 13 or 14 female disciples. Most of them were wearing Bamboo Heights clothing. But no matter male or female, almost all of them had outstanding temperament. The men were dignified, the women were beautiful and generous, handsome men and beautiful women everywhere. Anyone would say that Jadian has a good successor. The future is bright. After Rainbow Bridge, they arrived at Jadian's spiritual beast, Water Kirin, living in Jade Pond. Different from 5 years ago when Shah Danan and Bei first arrived, this ancient beast, respectfully called Master Spirit by Jadian disciples, was not hiding in the pond, but was lying on the ground next to the pond, basking in the sun. But looking at its lazy appearance, it was no different from 5 years ago. Jadian disciples walked down Rainbow Bridge, saluted to this giant creature, then stepped on the stairs next to the pond, walking toward the high crystal hall. Bei and Shah Danan followed behind them, whispered to Shah Danan, "Do you remember what happened when we first arrived?" Shah Danan nodded, said with lingering fear, "I remember, drenched in water, but that's okay. Seeing such a big monster, it really scared me." Lin Jingyu's lips revealed a trace of smile, said, "That's right. When we were in Grass Temple Village, when did we see such a thing? I thought the biggest animal in this world is the black bear on Qinyan Hill." Sha Danan laughed. Everyone turned to look at him. Sha Danan was surprised and quickly stopped laughing. Bei was also surprised, coughed twice, his face slightly red. The others looked at him for a few seconds, then turned around and continued walking. Sha Danan was relieved, turned to Bei. Their eyes met, both smiled. The dozens of people in front quickly passed. Sha Danan and Bei walked down Rainbow Bridge, came to pond, and respectfully saluted to the water Kirin. But from the beginning, this water Kirin seemed to be in a very deep sleep. No matter who saluted, it did not respond. Now buried its head in sleep, snoring like thunder, 100% did not know these two Jadian juniors were saluting it. Sha Danan and Bei did not expect the water Kirin to respond to them. After saluting, they walked up the stairs. Sha Danan said, "Jingyu, last time you came to Bamboo Peak, you were in a hurry. I did not congratulate you. I did not expect you to have such a high cultivation in just a few years." Lin Jingyu smiled, said, "This is all because of my benevolent teacher Vasp, Kalo Zhenren, and the other Shixiangs." Speaking to here, he paused, his voice gradually became low, said, "Actually, in the first few years, every time I practiced hard, I would think of the pile of bloody bodies in Grass Temple Village. My heart ached. So, I hardened my heart to practice hard, hoping that one day I can avenge my parents and the villagers." Sha Danan's heart was sour. He reached out his hand and patted him on the shoulder. Bei calmed himself down, calmed his mind, smiled. "Well, let's not talk about the past. How about you? How is your practice?" Sha Danan shook his head, said, "You know I'm not as smart as you. These years in Bamboo Peak, Master and Shixiangs are very good to me, but I am too stupid. My cultivation progress is very slow. I am very sorry to Master and to Shixiang." Bei snorted, said, "How are you stupid? I think it is your short master purposely making it difficult for you, not teaching you the real Jadian cultivation." Sha Danan did not expect Bei still hold a grudge against Tian Belize from the dispute 2 years ago, immediately smiled. "No, my master is not that kind of person. Forget it. Let's not talk about me, right? Is your Esper still the Dragon Slayer from 2 years ago?" Bei nodded and said with a smile, "This divine sword is the most precious treasure of the Dragon Head Peak. My master bestowed this sword to me. Not only is it extremely powerful, it also has spirituality, which is of great help to my cultivation." Sha Danan's heart was envious. His face also showed, said, "That is the best." Bei smiled and asked, "What about you, Xiao Fan? Do you have any Esper?" Sha Danan was startled, subconsciously touched the black fire stick in his pocket. A trace of coldness faintly crept up his palm. "No," he whispered. "My cultivation is not enough, cannot use the Esper yet." Bei did not care, seemed to have expected it, comforted him. "It doesn't matter, Xiao Fan. As long as you practice diligently, you will certainly succeed. Anyway, we are still young. Just take this as an opportunity to broaden our horizons." The corner of Sha Danan's mouth twitched, looking at his old friend's kind face, listening to his gentle words, but did not feel a trace of comfort. Broaden his horizons? Everyone thought he came here just to broaden his horizons. Thinking of this, his heart suddenly had an unspeakable anger, like a fire burning in the depths of his heart, but in a blink of an eye it disappeared. He lowered his head, did not speak, did not even have the intention to blame his friend, because he found that even he himself thought the same. As if responding to his thoughts, the fire stick in his pocket that was still connected to his palm suddenly had a reaction. In a moment, the coldness spread from his palm to his shoulder. Sha Danan was surprised, but then he found that the feeling did not harm his body at all. Instead, it was cool and comfortable. He looked to the side, but found that Bei did not feel anything. Just when Sha Danan was relieved, suddenly, a deafening roar broke out from behind them. Sha Danan was still okay, but even Bei, whose cultivation is far better than him, was like him. His whole body shook, his ears ringing, and some of the Jadian disciples in front of them also seemed to have the same situation. Everyone was extremely surprised in the sacred land of Jadian. How can there be Such a strange sound. They all turned around and looked. They were even more shocked. Chapter 28. Beside the pond, that huge beast, Water Kirin, who had been sleeping soundly, suddenly woke up, fiercely turned its head, its huge eyes revealing endless ferocious glint. The hair on its back all stood up, opened its bloody mouth, revealing two long, sharp fangs, actually assuming an attacking stance. And its target was the Qing Yun sect disciples standing on the steps. The Water Qilin was a desolate-era spiritual beast, an ancient beast. The moment it displayed its might, the weather immediately changed. The originally blue sky actually darkened in an instant. As it took its first step onto the stairs, the originally calm mountain wind became a violent gale. It whistled sharply and swept across the peak of Heaven's Peak. In the pond closest to Water Kirin, the water surface changed even more. From its mirror-like surface started to tremble, following which it violently rotated. The entire pond rapidly rotated. A deep whirlpool formed in the center. In the depths of that whirlpool, rumbling sounds seemed to be heard. After a short moment, everyone heard a loud sound, and a pillar of water suddenly shot up into the sky from the depths of the whirlpool. It was actually as thick as 3 people wrapping their arms around it. Moreover, it condensed and didn't disperse, making a turn in midair before turning down in midair. As if it was driven by something, it landed in front of the Water Qilin. It was as if it was a swimming dragon, sparkling and translucent as it spun and swam in the air. At this moment, all the Qing Yun sect disciples standing on the steps, including Kaheo and the rest with the most profound cultivation, could not maintain their composure. All of their countenances changed. Some were even pale, slightly trembling. The reason why Water Kirin could become Qing Yi founder's right-hand man in eliminating the evil 1,000 years ago, and in this 1,000 years, it was extremely revered by Qing Yun sect. Its power at this moment was completely revealed. Metal, wood, water, fire, earth, the 5 elements. Water Kirin was the best spiritual creature of the water element. Just looking at its ability to manipulate water in the air without borrowing any force. The water column it summoned was thick and did not disperse, even circling in mid-air without any strenuous expression. The strength of its spiritual power, the purity of its spirit power, had long surpassed the ordinary cultivators, even in Qing Yun's sect, which was filled with experts, not to mention purely using spirit power. Even with the help of magical weapons, there were not many who could achieve this level. At this moment, heaven and earth darkened, the wind and clouds surged. The Qing Yun sect disciples saw Elder Spirit Water Unicorn had never shown such thunderous rage for over 1,000 years. They were all dumbstruck at a loss of what to do. In the blink of an eye, the Water Qilin roared furiously, and its eyes widened. The fury and hatred in its eyes became thicker and thicker, as if it had sensed some deep hatred or extreme abhorrence. It wanted to fight to the death, and it wouldn't rest until one of them was dead. And the thick water column circling in front of this enormous beast was also moving faster and faster. Suddenly a loud sound. Boom! The enormous water column, carrying endless momentum, covered the sky and covered the earth, struck towards the Qing Yin disciples on the stairs. At this crucial moment, a shout echoed in the air. "Spirit Venerable, please calm down." A dark green figure, as if appearing out of thin air, suddenly appeared in mid-air between the Water Unicorn and the Qing Yun disciples. It was Qing Yun's sect head, Reverend Daoxian. Not seen for 5 years, his sage-like demeanor did not change at all, just that right now his brows were tightly knitted. Obviously, he was puzzled by the Water Unicorn's sudden attack, but the situation was urgent. Behind him were several of Qing Yun's sect's most outstanding young disciples, and in front of the whistling water column, there were waves of ripples, indistinctly the shadows of various ferocious, enormous beasts. Obviously, the ferocious beasts that were killed by the Water Unicorn in the past. After they died, their souls were absorbed into the Water Unicorn's body, unable to reincarnate. Right now, they were being used by the Water Unicorn in the water column, increasing its power. Even with Reverend Daoxian's omnipotent abilities, he couldn't help but be shocked. Looking at the approaching water column, Daoxian had nowhere to hide. He could only take a deep breath. his mouth chanted, "Immeasurable deity." Both hands raised, hugging the ball in the air, left and right hands forming sword finger gestures, seemingly slow but actually fast, drew a Taiji diagram in front of him. In a moment, this diagram shone in the air. White light bursts, propitious air billowed, and then Daoxian turned around. The dark green Taoist robe on his body fluttered without wind, abruptly floated down from his body. The Taiji diagram in the air, immediately, as if it was commanded, charged onto the Taoist robe. At that moment, it was imprinted on the Taoist robe. This dark green Taoist robe seemed to be a celestial treasure. After receiving that Taiji diagram, with a sound, it grew with the wind. In a moment, it became more than 10 times bigger, lying in midair. Hua! A heavy sound. The water column controlled by water Kirin hit the enlarged dark green Taoist robe. The roar from the water column seemed to be the angry roar of the monsters. Under the heavy hit of the dark green Taoist robe, immediately stepped back several yards. The center of the Taoist robe that was hit by the water column was deeply swollen. It could be seen that the force of the impact was great. The Jadian disciples who were standing on the stairs, almost dumbfounded, felt a sudden gust of strong wind. All of them could not stand steadily, except for a few with deep cultivation who could barely hold on. Most of them fell to the left and right. Everyone could not help but pale if Master Doyle Shun did not block the thunderous attack of Water Kirin. They really do not know what the result would be. Sha Danan's face was pale. He could not stand steadily. Fell to the side. Bei saw it from the corner of his eye, was about to reach out his hand to help, but his body tilted and fell to the other side, unable to take care of himself. Sha Danan was shocked, subconsciously let go of his hand that was holding the fire stick, desperately trying to find a place to support himself. He did not notice that once his hand left the fire stick, the cold feeling disappeared without a trace. In the air, Master Doyle Shun's face was solemn, waiting, and behind him, shwa, 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 more than 10 figures appeared, standing in the air behind him. The leader was Master Vaskalo. The rest were the heads of the 6 houses and the elders of each house. Tian Belis and Serene were also among them, all of them looking serious. Qing Yun's sect experts were all here, looking at the world, encountering this kind of situation. Anyone would be at least 70% afraid, but this water unicorn, under the watchful eyes of Qing Yun's sect highly skilled elders, did not show the slightest bit of fear. But under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the water unicorn's eyes, which were burning with rage, suddenly calmed down, instead revealed a strange expression, as if puzzled, and the huge water column in front of it also slowly shrunk, finally lost control, and fell to the ground. With a sound, drenched the ground. At this moment, the water Chilant's aura was completely gone, but its huge body was still standing in its original spot, looking rather terrifying. It didn't pay any attention to the group of elders in midair, and its eyes only stared at the young disciples on the platform. Its gaze swept around, and it used its nose to sniff the air, but it didn't seem to smell anything. After a long while, after repeating this strange action many times, the water Chilan seemed to have finally given up. It shook its huge head, turned around, and waddled to another piece of empty land, lay down, leaned its head on its legs, and closed its eyes. Not long after, it actually started snoring again. The Jadian people looked at each other, stunned. Master Vaskalo was the first to recover, quietly moved next to Master Doyle Shun, whispered, "Head Shi Xiao, it is not suitable to let the disciples stay here for too long." Daoxian came to himself. He glanced at Song Song, then nodded and said, "You take the disciples to go up first. I will go to see what happened to the spiritual master." Then he turned around and flew towards the water Kylan. Vaskalo turned around, said loudly, "Master Spirit just played a joke on everyone. No need to be nervous. Now all the disciples who are participating in the tournament go to Crystal Hall in order." The disciples answered in unison, restored the order, and went up. But in their hearts, when they saw the water Chilant's soul-stirring attack just now, there were probably not many people who would believe that it was a joke. Following behind the crowd, Sha Danan and Bei entered the grand and spacious Crystal Hall. Standing in the hall, Sha Danan suddenly felt the memories of the past 5 years came back to him. Jingyu, Sha Danan suddenly whispered. What? Bei looked at Sha Danan. Sha Danan said in a low voice, I suddenly remembered one thing. In these years, have you seen Uncle Wang Air? Bei's face darkened, then shook his head. No. Today is also the first time I returned to Peak of Widows. 3 years ago, I asked Kevin Shixiang about Uncle Wang's situation. He said that he was still as crazy as before, running around Peak of Widows all day. But with the Shixiang from the main sect taking care of him, there should be no problem. Chapter 29. Sha Danan was silent for a while, then said, After this contest, I want to go see him. You want to go? Bei nodded, said, Okay, I also want to see him. At this moment, above the main hall, suddenly a green shadow flashed. It was Reverend Doyle Shun, who flashed in from outside. All the elders of Jadian looked at him. Taoist Vaskalo walked up and asked, Head Shixiang, Elder Spirit. Doyle Shun raised his hand and signaled to him. Master Vaskalo immediately understood and stopped talking. Then Reverend Daoxian nonchalantly turned around, amiably said to the dozens of Qing Yun sect young disciples standing in the main hall, Everyone is here, good. The disciples bowed together, said, Greetings, Master Doyle Shun. Reverend Doyle Shun smiled, walked back to his seat, glanced at Taoist Song Song. Taoist Song Song then walked forward, said in a clear voice, Everyone, all of you are Qing Yun sect's young generation's leading figures. Our Qing Yun branch has been established for more than 2,000 years, truly the orthodox Taoist, the leader of the good faction. But the ancients have a saying, success comes from hard work, waste comes from playing. There's also a saying, sailing against the current, if you do not advance, you will fall back. In order to warn the future generations and to help the young disciples, the martial competition of 7 Peaks was a grand event. It has been 20 years since then. The Qing Yun sect disciples exclaimed in surprise. 20 sessions, counting every 60 years, it would be 1,200 years. Taoist Vaskalo looked at the crowd's reaction with satisfaction and said, Until today, our Qing Yun sect, under the leadership of Taoist Shin sect head senior brother, has flourished, far surpassing our previous life. The number of outstanding disciples in the younger generation is innumerable. Therefore, after Master Shixiang discussed with the heads of the houses, the number of contestants increased to 64 to avoid any regret. Sha Danan couldn't help but look at Tian Belize. Tian Belize was sitting next to Master Doyle Shun. His face was expressionless, but his eyes showed impatience. After all, the matter of increasing the number of contestants was discussed with the heads of the houses, but it was still up to Master Doyle Shun and Master Vaskalo. Taoist Vaskalo continued. In this examination, the number of participants has doubled, so there are some changes in the drawing of lots. Everyone, please take a look. As he said that, he pointed to an empty space on the right side of the hall. Everyone looked over and saw a large mahogany box placed there. It was squarish, and there was only a small hole at the top that could fit an arm in. In that mahogany box, there are a total of 63 wax pills. In each of them, there's a note, written on it from 1 to 63. The disciples suddenly made an uproar. Taoist Vaskalo ignored them, continued, After the lots are drawn, the matches will be carried out according to the numbers. Number 1 against 64, 2 against 63, 3 against 62, so on and so forth in the second round. The winner of number 1 and 64 will fight against the winner of number 2 and 63, so on and so forth, until the final battle. Do you understand? The Jadian disciples standing in the hall were silent for a while. Suddenly someone loudly said, May I ask Vasp Kalo Shu? There are obviously 64 people. How come there are only 63 wax pills? Taoist Vaskalo seemed to be prepared for this question. He coughed and said, The rules of this examination is that each of the 7 houses of Jadian will send out 9 people, among which the main house will send out 1 more person. But, cough cough, because one house only sent out a total of 8 disciples, so there is 1 less person. So there are only 63 people. For a moment, everyone's eyes fell on the face of Bamboo Valley head Tian Belize. Anger flashed across Tian Belize's face, but he sat upright in his seat, did not move. The Jadian disciples below suddenly made an uproar, discussing animatedly. After the crowd calmed down, Master Vaskalo then said seriously, "But this is not a difficult matter. In those 63 wax pills, as long as there is a disciple who draws number 1, then that disciple is extremely lucky, because there is no opponent for number 64, so he does not have a bye in the first round." The Jadian disciples were in an uproar again, but Jadian was a famous faction after all. Their discipline was very strict. Although this method looked quite funny, no one objected. Master Doyleshun stood up, looked around. He was the head of the faction. Immediately everyone was silent. Master Doyleshun nodded, said, "If so, then everyone go and draw lots." In the main hall, everyone's eyes fell on the mahogany box. First, 10 disciples from the main branch came out and walked to the box in turn. Each of them took out a wax pill, then the disciples from the Dragonhead Peak. Bay said goodbye to Shah Danon and also walked out. Shah Danon looked at his back, then looked at the 7 heads and the elders sitting at the top. Among these people, from Reverend Daoxian Below, Taoist Song Song, Taoist Tianyun, Shang Zhengliang, Zhang Shuchang, and the other branch leaders, he had met them 5 years ago. Only the female nun sitting on the last chair on the right had not met. But looking at her, most likely she was the famous Small Bamboo Valley leader, Shuiwa Master. Shah Danon often heard his Shixiangs mention this Shu. He heard Bamboo Height is the only house in Jadian that only accepts female disciples. Master Shueyu's cultivation is also very high, very famous in Jadian. The disciples of Small Bamboo Peak had also performed outstandingly in the previous 7 Peaks tournament. Shah Danon took a few more glances at Master Shueyu. She looked about 30 years old, about the same as Shenyang Surin. Oval face, thin eyebrows, smooth nose, a pair of bright almond eyes. Wearing a moon-white Taoist robe, she looked very charming. Behind her, there were no elders but a female disciple. She wore clothes as white as snow and had an extremely beautiful appearance. She carried a long sword on her back. The scabbard and hilt of the sword were sky blue in color and had a bright luster. Ripples of light could be faintly seen. With a single glance, one could tell that it was an immortal treasure. While he was lost in thought, the young woman seemed to feel his eyes. She suddenly turned her head, coldly stared at Shah Danon with eyes like lightning. Shah Danon's heart shook, like he was struck by lightning. His eyes seemed to be stung. He was surprised, his face blushed. The woman's face was expressionless, but there was a hint of contempt in her eyes. Shah Danon quickly lowered his head. At this awkward moment, someone suddenly pulled him. Hedy's voice said, "Xiao Fan, why are you spacing out? It's our turn to draw lots." Shah Danon quickly said, "Yes, yes." Then he did not dare to look at Master Shueyu again. He turned around and followed Hedy to the mahogany box. Right now, only Big Bamboo Valley and Small Bamboo Valley had not drawn their lots. With Xavion in the lead, the Big Bamboo Valley people walked to the box one by one, took out the wax pellets, and returned to the hall. After which, when everyone was checking what number they had drawn, 8 female disciples walked out from Small Bamboo Valley. 1 man was among them, and the lady in white standing behind Shuiwen Master bowed her head and spoke to Shuiwen Master. Shuiwen Master nodded, said, "You two go." The white-dressed girl answered, walked to the Bamboo Height disciples, smiled with Bako and others, then went to the mahogany box and took out the last 9 wax balls. At this moment, in the main hall, all the disciples were checking their wax balls, and the elders of the various branches sitting in the seats of honor couldn't help but become nervous. Their gazes were fixed on the disciples of their own branches, and they hoped that their disciples would draw a good lot. If they drew the piece of paper with the number 1 written on it, it would naturally be for the best. As if responding to the mood of the teachers, the young disciples of Jadian sect below the hall all voiced out, "Ah, I am 26. I'm 33, what is yours? Oh, I am 47. Don't know what number my opponent is, let me count." It was just that no one said that they had drawn the precious number 1 slip after talking for a long time. Master Vasp Kalo frowned, coughed twice, said loudly, "Who drew number 1? His voice was loud and clear, suppressing all the other voices. The hall was silent. After a long time, in the crowd, suddenly there was a small voice, with a trace of surprise and caution, as if even he himself did not believe it, said, "Reporting reporting to Vasp Kalo Sherbois. It is here. Everyone looked at him, surprised. Shah Danon was standing in the crowd, holding a piece of paper in his hand. His eyes looked at Tian Belize, said timidly. Chapter 30. In that instant, everyone's eyes landed on this unremarkable Big Bamboo Valley disciple. Tian Bui and Suru looked at each other. Suru smiled and nodded. The Bamboo Peak disciples gathered around with smiles on their faces. Ladaxin heavily patted Shah Danon's shoulder, smiled. Stinking brat. Can't tell your luck is so good. Shah Danon scratched his head, stuck out his tongue. The surprise in his heart had turned into surprise. Amanla regretfully patted his head, said, I should have made a bet on who will get the number one. Heh. It must be a big upset win. Shoo shoo, Hede scolded him, then turned to Shah Danon and said, Shao Fan, since it is useless for you to enter the second round, why don't you give this to me? Shah Danon did not expect his Shiji to say that. He was startled for a moment, then said, Oh, then handed over the note with one. Xavion's face changed slightly, looked around, whispered, Shao Shimmy, don't mess around. Hede giggled, beautiful as peach blossom. Her jade-like cheeks blushed. She stretched out her green onion-like finger, lightly flicked Shah Danon's forehead, said, Little idiot, I am joking with you. Shah Danon blinked his eyes, then laughed. At this moment, at the elder's side, Master Vasp Kalo frowned, then loudly said, Good. Since the drawing of lots has been completed, all disciples come here and report your name according to the number. Later I will use the red list to post it. Then you will know who your opponent is. Now had Shi Xiang please speak. The noisy disciples heard that Head Master Doilshan was going to speak. They all quieted down. Reverend Daoxian stood up from his seat, slowly walked to the front of the crowd. His gaze swept across the disciples, and then said, Everyone, all of you are the elites of our Qing Yun sect's younger generation. Your qualifications and talents are all outstanding. In the future, Qing Yun sect's various branches leaders, elders, even my sect head position, will most likely be taken up by the best among you all. The Qing Yun disciples were in an uproar, and many of their faces revealed expressions of yearning and excitement. Reverend Daoxian revealed a kind smile, said, Of course, if you want to reach this step and sit in the position of these head elders behind me, you all still need to work harder. Everyone replied in unison, Yes. Reverend Daoxian stroked his long beard, nodded his head, sternly said, Our Qing Yun sect, since founder Qing Yunzi established the sect, has always been a famous good faction, and now it is already the world's good faction leader in the cultivation world. In this world, the righteous path flourished, the evil demons retreated, and the people of the world enjoyed peace. However, the remnants of the devil path are treacherous and vicious. Their hearts are not dead, and these years, they seem to be ready to make trouble. At this time, we, the people of the righteous path, need to uphold the Tao and eliminate them. Therefore, everyone must focus on cultivation and strengthen your will. As long as we are strong and independent, the devil path will not be able to take advantage of us. All the disciples shouted, We will follow sect leaders' teachings. Reverend Daoxian nodded, smiled, said, Good. Also, there is one more thing that I would like to announce to everyone. In order to encourage the Jadian disciples to work hard and cultivate, I have discussed with all the head elders and decided that starting from this year's 7 Peaks tournament, after every 7 Peaks tournament, the final winner will be given a small reward. The Jadian disciples were in an uproar. Reverend Daoxian looked at the young disciples, smiled, said, This time's reward is Union Mirror. What is it? Shah Danon was stunned for a moment. He had never heard of such a thing. He could not help but look around him. He saw Hede, Amanla, and others were also puzzled. The young disciples of other houses also did not seem to know much about it. Kevern, Xavion, Baymin, and other disciples who had been in the door for a long time changed their faces. Their faces showed rare excitement and yearning. Hede and others also noticed that the Shi Xiang and others seemed to know something. They approached and asked quietly, To Shi Xiang, what is Union Mirror? Xavion whispered, Union Mirror is our faction's 10th generation Master Wu Fangzi's Esper. I have never seen what it looks like, but I have heard from Master that it is one of our faction's rare treasures. It is very powerful and has a special ability. As long as the user's spiritual power is strong enough, Union Mirror can reflect all attacks and become undefeatable. Everyone opened their mouths wide. Amandla stuttered. Then, isn't it invincible? Xavion shrugged his shoulders, said, Anyway, I am not too sure what it is like exactly, but what teacher said will not be wrong this time. He glanced at Reverend Daoxian, lowered his voice, said, Seems like this time sect head and teacher seemed to have put in a lot of effort. Everyone had a weird expression on their faces. Most of them seemed to be secretly swallowing their saliva. Seemed like with a rare treasure in front of them, even the cultivators would be moved. Reverend Daoxian paused for a while, smiled, and looked at the young disciples discussing. After a while, he said, Well, that's about it. You all go back and rest. Tomorrow morning, the Seven Peaks tournament will start. Qing Yun disciples saluted together and said, Yes, sect leader Reverend. Reverend Daoxian nodded and said, You all go. The disciples gradually retreated. In the main hall, there were only Qing Yun's sect's 7 heads and a dozen elders left. Reverend Daoxian turned around and smiled at those elders. Fellow Shixiang, you all should also go back and rest. From tomorrow onwards, there will be many competitions. I still need you all to take care of them. Some of those elders had a head full of white hair, full of wrinkles. Some looked extremely young and had techniques to preserve their youthful looks. Right now, after hearing Reverend Daoxian's words, all of them did not speak much and walked out one by one. Until the end, in the Crystal Hall, only Qing Yun's sect's 7 branches leaders were left. Reverend Daoxian slowly put away the kind smile on his face. His eyes swept across the other 6 people sitting on the chairs, said lightly, Well, now there are only 7 of us. Head of Rising Sun Peak, Shang Zhengliang, who sat on the right, frowned and said, Head Shixiang, do you have anything to say to us? Reverend Daoxian nodded, expressionless, said slowly, I just went to see Master Spirit. Hearing that, everyone's face changed. Walking down the stairs, the disciples were still trembling when they passed by the green pond. But this time, the water Kirin was sleeping peacefully and didn't move. After crossing the Rainbow Bridge, they returned to the fairyland-like square of Cloud Sea. They said a few words to Sha Danan, then left with the Dragon Head Peak disciples. Sha Danan watched him go far away, then returned to the Bamboo Peak disciples. Hearing Xavion telling everyone about the things to pay attention to and the accommodation situation, Sha Danan suddenly remembered something, cried, Oh no. Everyone was taken aback. Tian Linger stood beside him, asked in surprise, Xiao Fan, what happened? Sha Danan looked around, said hurriedly, I was talking to Bei and forgot about Ash. I don't know where it is now. Everyone remembered that they didn't notice the gray monkey's trace. They looked around, only to see the white clouds. The disciples were leaving, but there was no sign of Ash. Sha Danan was very anxious. Ever since he brought Ash back from the valley 2 years ago, the man and the monkey, and later also Big Yella, had been living in the same house. Their relationship was very deep. Peak of Widows was so tall that it pierced through the clouds. If Ash went somewhere to find wild fruits to eat, how could he find it? While he was in a hurry, Sha Danan suddenly heard Hede exclaimed. He turned and saw Hede was smiling, pointing to the front, smiled. Look. Everyone looked and couldn't help but laugh. Ash was sitting on the back of Tian Beli's big yellow dog, Ji, waving its paws at Sha Danan. The big yellow dog was running toward them with its mouth closed, biting on a bone. Not long after, Big Yella and Ash arrived. Ash jumped on his Sha Danan's shoulder. Sha Danan quickly patted Ash's head, pretended to be angry. Where did you go? Ash was not afraid, smiled, and pointed at Big Yella, who was gnawing on the bone. Sha Danan watched for a while, then suddenly asked, Where did this bone come from? Ash heard this, made some gestures, and pointed to a direction at the end of the square. Sha Danan looked at Xavion. Xavion quickly looked around. His face was awkward and funny. He lowered his voice, whispered, That is the kitchen where the disciples eat. Everyone was startled, then laughed and shook their heads. Xavion led them to the other side, said, Let's go to the dormitory. Right, Xiao Shimmy, You're a girl. I arranged for you to live with Bamboo Heights Shimmy. You don't mind, do you? Hidi shook her head and smiled. I just wanted to talk with Bako Jiejie and help the Shixiang put in a few good words. Everyone laughed. Xavion blushed, pretended not to hear, and strode out. The people behind him were laughing and talking. Sha Danon, who was walking at the back, did not join in, but stared at the monkey on his shoulder and said, "Damn monkey, if you go and steal again, see how I will punish you." Chapter 31. Ash squeak, 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 twice grinned, not sure if it did not understand or did not care about Sha Danon's words. Sha Danon scolded it a few more times, walked forward, then remembered something, turned his head and shouted, "Let's go, damn dog. Only know how to eat." Big Yella, who was lying on the ground, gnawing on the bone, finally raised his eyes. Seeing everyone had gone far away, he stood up, picked up the half-eaten bone, and lazily chased after them. In the Crystal Hall, Qing Yun Sec's 7 branches leaders gathered here. Right now their attention was attracted by Reverend Daoxian. Dusk Fall Peak, Headmaster Tian Yun stood up first, said, "Head Shi Xiang, can you tell what happened to Master Spirit?" Master Doilshan sighed, said slowly, "I have checked carefully. There is nothing strange about Master Spirit." "What?" A look of surprise appeared on the faces of all the heads. Reverend Doilshan looked at his fellow disciples and said, "That's true. I've looked at Venerable Spirit several times. Everything is normal. I really can't understand why it suddenly became so angry, and why it disappeared so quickly." Tian Belize pondered for a moment, said, "I saw Master Spirit's target was a group of young disciples. Could it be someone angered it?" Bamboo Height, Head Shueyu Master said, "Impossible. If the disciples really angered Master Spirit, why would Master Spirit give up after one attack?" Shueyu's appearance was quite beautiful, but when she spoke, her tone was cold, as if carrying a trace of cold air. Tian Bui glanced at her, then did not say anything. Master Doyle Shun shook his head, said, "Master Spirit is an ancient spirit beast. It is psychic. For thousands of years, there has never been such an abnormal situation. There must be a reason." Zheng Shuchang, who was sitting on the left side of the Peak of Wind's first seat, had white hair on his temples and looked the oldest among the 7 present, said, "Could it be that sect head Shi Xiang has already made a decision?" Master Doyle Shun sighed, said, "To be honest, I am also confused about this. But the Venerable Spirit is our Qing Yun sect's guardian spirit beast. It's not a small matter. I wanted to use our sect's secret psychic communication technique to investigate it, but unexpectedly." Speaking till here, Reverend Daoxian suddenly stopped. The people beside him who were listening halfway suddenly stopped. Tianbui was the first to ask, "Head Shixiang, what is it?" Master Doyle Shun looked embarrassed and said, "This psychic magic is just a small skill, but it can communicate with Venerable Spirit. Unexpectedly, when I was about to use it, Venerable Spirit had already fallen asleep, so I couldn't do anything." Everyone was speechless. Master Doyle Shun coughed twice, then said seriously, "You don't have to worry about this. We'll take our time to think about it after the spiritual master wakes up. There's one more thing that I'd like to discuss with all of you." Everyone saw Reverend Daoxian's serious face. It seemed like it was not a small matter. They all kept their smiles and sat down. Master Doyle Shun also returned to his seat, pondered for a while, then said, "Everyone, do you know that there is a Kongsang mountain 3,000 miles to the east?" Everyone was stunned. Master Vascalo was the first to come back to his senses, said, "Everyone, do you know that there is a Kongsang mountain 3,000 miles to the east?" Master Doyle Shun nodded, said yes. Zhang Shutsong frowned, said, "I heard that Kongsang Mountain is a natural giant cave. It goes straight into the ground. It's unfathomably deep. It's cold and damp. Only countless bats live in it. It said that there are millions of them. This kind of barren land. Why would Senior Brother mention it?" Master Doyle Shun said slowly, "You may not know, although this Kongsang Mountain seems to be far away, but 800 years ago, it was an important stronghold of the evil faction. That ancient cave is cold and damp. It's perfect for those evil sect to practice their evil magic. After that, under the encirclement of our righteous people, the evil faction retreated in defeat. Then this place became deserted. Master Shui said coldly. Then why did head senior brother mention again now? What is the meaning? Master Shui's attitude toward Master Doyle Shun was not friendly, but everyone here knew that Master Shui always spoke like this. Master Doyle Shun did not take it to heart. Only sighed, said, Sister Shui, you may not know, half a year ago, I received a letter from Funxiang Valley. It said that recently near the Kongseng Mountain, there seemed to be traces of evil faction activities, and they asked for my opinion. After some consideration, I ordered my second disciple, Yikai, to quickly go to Kongseng Mountain to check it out. Morning Sun Peak Shang Zhengliang heard this, smiled, said, Isn't that good? Xiao Yikai Shiji is talented, his cultivation is profound, he is indeed one of the best in Jade. In the last 7 Peaks tournament, he even won the crown. With him there, what can't be done? Master Doyle Shin smiled, said, Senior brother Shang is too kind, but after Yikai went to Kongseng Mountain, a few months later, there was a letter back. It said that there were indeed evil faction activities near the Kongseng Mountain, and their purpose was even more shocking. Everyone was shocked. Zheng Shuchang said, What is it? Master Doyle Shun's face was calm. No emotions could be seen, said, According to Yikai's letter, he captured an evil faction disciple, and from him, he found out that 800 years ago, the Cave of Fangs was the headquarters of one of the evil faction's branches, Blood Forger Hall. At that time, Blood Forger Hall's power was strong. It was one of the 5 main forces of the evil faction, but after being defeated by our good faction ancestors, it was unable to recover, and the Cave of Fangs was also abandoned. But for some reason, in recent years, Blood Forger Hall, which had been declining for a long time, seemed to show signs of rising again. And in Blood Forger Hall, during the Battle of the Cave of Fangs, although all the main figures of Blood Forger Hall were killed by our good faction people, but in the Cave of Fangs, there was an extremely well-hidden secret treasure cave. Inside, there were many rare treasures, evil books, and evil scrolls. It had never been discovered by anyone. At this point, everyone understood. Taoist Vasp Kalo sneered, said, Evil faction, wishful thinking. Master Doyle Shun shook his head, said, Let's not talk about whether this rumor is true or not, but as far as I know, after the battle 800 years ago, the good faction people really did not discover any secret treasure cave in the Cave of Fangs. Other things are fine, but if there really is this secret treasure cave, I'm afraid there will be a very dangerous object inside. We must guard against it. Everyone looked at Doyle Shun. Taoist Tan Yun said, Senior brother, what kind of dangerous object are you referring to? Why is it so important? Master Doyle Shun glanced at the people around him. In a deep voice said, Sinister orb. Everyone was moved. Taoist Vasp Kalo asked in surprise, Didn't this evil object long disappear with Elder Blackheart's death? Master Doyle Shun shook his head and said, Not so, although Elder Blackheart is dead, but Sinister Orb may not have disappeared from the world. Like this kind of dangerous object, ordinary people cannot control it. If the evil faction, evil people's cultivation is not high enough, they might hide it. And Elder Blackheart was born in the evil faction Blood Forger Hall. Therefore, based on my conjecture, it is very possible that Sinister Orb is in this secret cave. Everyone heard Master Doyle Shun's words. For a moment, did not speak. After a long while, it was that cold Shua master who spoke. Then what does head senior brother intend to do? Master Doyle Shun said, After I received Yikai's message, I immediately informed Funxiang Valley and Tianyin Temple. Not long after, these 2 big sects also replied, said that they will also send their best disciples to Kongseng Mountain to stop the evil faction evildoers, uphold the Tao, and eradicate the traitors. Tian Bui frowned, said, Then head senior brother means? Master Doyle Shun's face revealed a smile, said, Speaking of which, this is also a rare opportunity to gain experience. Although there are many young talents in our Jadian, but most of them did not go out to train, and these years the world has been peaceful, and there has never been a confrontation with the evil faction, evil people. Taking advantage of this 7 Peaks tournament opportunity, I intend to send the top 4 young disciples to Kongseng Mountain. On one hand, it can stop the evil faction, evil people from going against the law. On the other hand, it can also gain experience and gain knowledge. Also, he kept his smile, his face turned serious, said, and I heard in the recent 100 years, Tianyin Temple and Funxiang Valley have produced a few outstanding disciples, talented people. If we continue to sit back and do nothing, I'm afraid our position as the leader of the good faction in the future will be hard to maintain. If so, I, Doyle Shun, will not have the face to meet the ancestors." Everyone nodded. Master Vascalo was the first to say, "Head senior brother is very far-sighted. What you said is very true." Doyleshin looked at the head, said, "If so, everyone has no objections." Everyone nodded in agreement. Master Doyleshin said, "Good, then it is decided. In Crystal Hall, the accommodations have already been arranged for the Shixiaos. Please go and rest." While speaking, he clapped his hands 3 times. Immediately, a few Taoist children came in from outside the door. "All of you, lead the heads to their rooms to rest." The Taoist children responded. The heads all stood up, bowed to Master Doyle Shan, and followed. Note 1. From the 4th volume of Shanhai Jing, Eastern Mountain Jing. The first of the 2 Eastern Mountain Jing, called Kongseng Mountain, north-facing Freshwater, east-facing Jiwu, south-facing Shaoling, west-facing Minzai. Chapter 32. The 7 Peaks Tournament was a grand event in Jade every 60 years. Now that there were hundreds of people on Peak of Tongtian, the accommodations were naturally tight. It was wishful thinking for the people of Big Bamboo Peak to think that they could live a carefree life in Big Bamboo Peak. Other than Tian Linger, who stayed with the girls, there were 7 male disciples from Bamboo Peak, starting from Songdarin. They all squeezed into one room. On Peak of Tongtian, the accommodation for Jadian disciples was usually 4 people to a room. Now, there were 3 mattresses on the floor. It was not bad, but it was unavoidable. At this moment, someone complained loudly. Really, they always talk about how good the main sect is, and now they want 7 of us to squeeze into one room. So stingy. Lao Lu, don't complain. If the main sect brothers hear it, it won't be good. Second Shixiang, you sleep on the bed. Of course it is comfortable. Why don't you look at me lying on the cold floor? Why don't we change beds? No way. You fell asleep so quickly. And you're even snoring? Oomph. Oomph. 4th senior brother, you've always been handsome, unrestrained, romantic, and elegant. You possess outstanding natural talent, and you're overflowing with talent. Ho-ho. What are you doing? Is it popular to fall asleep instantly? To Shixiang, you have always been kind. Why would you look at me? Ah, 3rd Shixiang roar. Everyone was shocked. At this time, the wall suddenly made a loud noise. Someone next door shouted angrily, "Hey, do you Bamboo Peak disciples snore so loudly at night?" The room suddenly became quiet. After a long time, someone laughed dryly. Then the voice seemed to remember something. "Ah, 5th Shixiang, what do you mean I am sleeping next to you? We're both on the floor. Do you want to change?" "I don't care." "Cough, cough, it's okay." "Sigh, the floor is cold, but it is too short. I can't sleep comfortably." "Speaking of which, little Shixiang is the best. Your body is just right." 6th senior brother, why are you talking with your eyes closed? Don't you see that there's a big dog and a monkey fighting with me for my quilt? My place is the most crowded, and you still dare to say that? But I still... Shut up, old 6. Several people in the room shouted at the same time. After dark, there were still many young disciples from the other 6 branches who came to Tongtian Peak for the first time. They were amazed and curious about the scenery of Tongtian Peak, but as the night deepened, everyone returned to their rooms to sleep. When darkness descended on this towering mountain peak, a cold moon shone down on the peak of the mountain. Sha Danan was sleeping soundly. Suddenly, he felt something moved next to him. He opened his sleepy eyes and saw Ash and Big Yellow were gone. He propped himself up and looked around. De Huang's yellow figure flashed past the door, a shadow on its back. Most likely it was the monkey Xiaohui. Sha Danan felt strange. It was so late at night. Where did the monkey and dog go? He quietly got up, put on some clothes, and went to the door. Under the cold moonlight, Big Yellow was carrying Ash and running toward Cloud Sea. Sha Danan looked at the direction they were running to, then remembered it was the peak of Widow's Kitchen that Xavion told him. He felt angry and funny at the same time. Big Yella had been raised by Tion Belize for hundreds of years. He could be considered as an enlightened old dog, but he did not expect it to be so greedy. He wanted to ignore them and go back to sleep, but after thinking about it, he thought that if someone saw Big Bamboo Valley's yellow dogs and gray monkeys eating secretly, it would be too embarrassing. It would be better to chase them back. He made up his mind. He looked up and saw Big Yella carrying Ash was only a blurry figure. He quickly chased after them. He sprinted all the way, taking care not to alert his fellow disciples in the other rooms. When he reached the square at the Sea of Clouds, he could no longer see De Huang and Xiao Hui. Under the cold moon, the clouds floated faintly, like muslin or smoke. It was too beautiful to behold. But after a few more glances, he was no longer in the mood to continue looking. He turned his head to look around and was about to walk in the direction of the kitchen. Suddenly, his heart skipped a beat. In the depths of the Sea of Clouds, on the other side of the direction of the kitchen, in the misty clouds, there was a slender figure walking forward. Looking at the direction of the person, it seemed that she was walking towards the Rainbow Bridge. Shah Danan stared at the figure. Even though it was far away, the figure was deeply engraved in his heart. He immediately recognized it was his Shiji Hidi. The night, so deep. Why did she go out alone? And where is she going? Shah Danan was startled. He did not know what to do. Thousands of thoughts came to his mind. His heart was in a mess. He seemed to have guessed something, but he still did not want to admit it. He turned his head, stared at the direction of the kitchen where Big Yella and Ash went. He made up his mind and walked toward there. At the same time, he said to himself, Shah Danan, mind your own business. Mind your own business. He walked 7 steps. The moonlight was like water, shining on this young man's body, very lonely. Then he stopped, looked up at the sky. A cold moon, hanging in the sky. His mouth seemed to move. After a moment, he quickly turned around, gritted his teeth, and ran toward the direction where the figure disappeared. The moonlight shone on his running figure with a desolate gentleness. In just a short while, Hidi's figure had already disappeared into the Sea of Clouds, but Shah Danan did not look anywhere else and ran towards the direction of Rainbow Bridge. Soon, he was on Rainbow Bridge. The mountain wind blew, the water on both sides of Rainbow Bridge rippled, reflecting the moon in the sky, cold and beautiful. But Shah Danan did not care, kept running. Run, run, run. Ran across Rainbow Bridge. He still did not see anyone's shadow. Until he ran to the end of the Rainbow Bridge, he suddenly felt a wave of confusion in his heart. The cold moonlight illuminated the green pond at the end of the Rainbow Bridge, making it as bright as day. He saw a beautiful figure standing beside the pond, staring at the sparkling water, lost in thought. Shah Danan was suddenly afraid, a kind of fear that he could not describe. He only knew that he could not let Shiji find out. He looked around and saw a small forest on the right side of the pond near Rainbow Bridge. He quietly ran toward it, hid there, and peeked at Hidi from the shadow. This peek was like an eternity. Under the moonlight beside the green pond, there was a young woman with a bit of sadness, a bit of expectation. Her eyebrows were drooping. Her eyes seemed to have a faint glow, like she was longing for something. She looked so beautiful. The mountain breeze blew gently across the surface of the water, brushing past her body. It also held its breath and stopped the sound, gently brushing against her clothes and hair, contrasting against her snow-white skin. In the depth of Shah Danan's heart, an indescribable gentleness rose. It was like that woman was the person he wanted to protect his life. Even if he had to go through all kinds of trials and tribulations for her, he will not hesitate, will not regret. At this moment, hope is an eternity. Hidi shimmy. Suddenly, a call was heard from the Rainbow Bridge. Tion Linger suddenly turned around. Her eyes instantly filled with joy. The corners of her mouth revealed a heartfelt smile. Qi Shi Xiang, you are here. Shah Danan's heart was like it was broken at that moment, but he could not feel any pain. His heart was empty. Only one word echoed. Qi Shi Xiang, Qi Shi Xiang, Qi Shi Xiang. He turned his head with difficulty. A person quickly walked down from Rainbow Bridge. Eyebrows like swords, eyes like stars, handsome, outstanding temperament. If it was not Kevern, who else could it be? Kiheo quickly walked to Tion Linger's side, warmly said, "I'm sorry, my senior and junior brothers are young and like to play, so they slept very late. That's why I came late, making you wait for a long time." Hidi was a little angry, but when she saw Kevern, the anger disappeared. She shook her head, smiled. "It's okay. I have not been here for long." She paused, looked at the pond, said, "But why did you ask to meet here?" Master Spirit suddenly got angry during the day. "I'm still a little scared." Kevern smiled and said, "It doesn't matter. I heard from my master that the venerable spirit is fine. It was just joking with us young disciples. Plus, it made such a ruckus during the day, so it's even quieter at night, right?" Hidi blushed, lowered her head, said, "Is it okay for us to meet secretly like this?" Kevern looked at her gentle and beautiful face, softly said, "Ling Air Shimmy, ever since we first met at Big Bamboo Valley 2 years ago, I can't forget you. I miss you so much that I can't sleep at night. My mind is filled with your shadow." Tion Linger subconsciously bit her lips. Her face became even redder, but she did not have the slightest intention of getting angry. Instead, there was a trace of sweetness in her heart. Kevern said, "Hidi Shimmy I." Hidi suddenly raised her head, said, "Chi Shi Xiang, you can call me Hidi." At this point, she suddenly lowered her head and said in a low voice, "That's what my father and mother call me." Kevern was overjoyed. As if he could not believe his ears, he hesitated before asking, "Really, Ling Ling?" Tion Linger glanced at him, stretched out her hand into her bosom, and slowly took out a small brocade box. Her eyes lowered, looked at the ground, and seemed to muster up her courage before speaking in a low voice. "This is cooling pearl. I've been carrying it with me for the past 2 years." After speaking, she did not dare to look at Kiheo again. Unexpectedly, after a long time, Kiheo did not make a sound. Tion Linger felt strange and secretly looked up at him. Kiheo's eyes were filled with joy, his face full of smiles, an indescribable look of happiness. They looked at each other for a long time. Suddenly, they opened their arms and hugged each other. The cold moonlight shone on them. It shone on the forest, but could not shine on the dark corners. After an unknown amount of time, the couple continued to whisper to each other until Kevern looked at the sky. The moon had already passed the eastern sky. He said, "Ling Air, it's getting late. We should go back. If we're discovered, it won't be good." Chapter 33. Hidi thought for a moment, then nodded her head. Both of them looked at each other and suddenly smiled. Everything was understood without words. Kiheo pulled Tion Linger's hand and slowly walked towards Rainbow Bridge. Under the moonlight, both of them were like a pair of affectionate mandarin ducks, leaning close to each other. After a while, they disappeared on Rainbow Bridge. The night was a bit more desolate. In the forest, in the shadow, Shah Danon slowly walked out, walked to the green pond, looked at the sparkling water, looked at the reflection of the cold moon in the water, gently swaying along with the ripples. He suddenly wanted to cry, but he did not cry out. The unknown pain was like a raging beast in his heart, making his heart full of scars. But he gritted his teeth, did not make a sound. It was like return to the situation 5 years ago. At that time, he lost everything, except for Bay. The world was completely changed. But tonight, at this time, only he alone, facing it. Roar! A low sound, like the snort of a beast, suddenly came from behind him. Shah Danon woke up from his confused mood. He turned around and immediately broke out in cold sweat. The spirit beast of Jadian, known as Master Spirit by everyone, Water Kirin, suddenly appeared behind him without a sound. It was very close to him, lowered its head. A pair of giant eyes seemed to touch Shah Danon's body. Not sure how it could do that with such a large body. Perhaps Shah Danon's heart was dead, so he did not notice it. But at this moment, Shah Danon's heart almost jumped out from his chest. Seeing Water Kirin's large body was in front of him, the long sharp teeth were shining under the moonlight. He was scared and took a few steps back. He tripped on a large stone and fell to the ground. When he came out, his clothes were not neat. He just put on a piece of clothing. His body was shaking. Then with a clang, something fell on the ground. The sound quickly spread in this quiet place, echoed on the water surface. Shah Danon and Water Kirin looked down at the same time. On the ground beside the water, between Shah Danon and Water Kirin, a black so-called fire stick was quietly lying there. In the pair of giant eyes of Water Kirin, Shah Danon's pale face and the ugly fire stick on the ground were reflected. Shah Danon felt his throat was dry. Cold sweat poured down. His heart desperately shouted, "Run, run, run." But in front of Water Kirin, no matter how he wanted, his feet were not his. They did not move. Water Kirin was a bit strange. It looked at Shah Danon, but its attention was attracted by the fire stick. The giant beast stared at the black fire stick, looking up and down, turning its big head back and forth, but still couldn't see anything. After a moment, it hesitated for a moment, then stretched out its front paw, carefully touched the fire stick. Shah Danon was stunned. Although he was still very scared, his heart was curious. He thought this master spirit was already old and confused after living for thousands of years. Or was it like the big yellow dog in Bamboo Peak, still childish and interested in a fire stick? The water cheelant's huge claws lightly touched the fire stick and then immediately retracted. It looked like it was very afraid of this stick. However, the fire stick moved a little, rolled a few times, and still calmly laid there, not moving at all. Water Kirin's eyes were confused, but it still did not give up. Its large head swayed, suddenly looked at Shah Danon. A deep but powerful roar came from its mouth. Shah Danon's heart skipped a beat. His muscles tightened, even his breathing stopped. Unexpectedly, the water cheelant only glanced at him and then looked at the fire stick again. This time, it actually lowered its head and placed its nose on the stick, sniffing it carefully. Shah Danon's heart was still beating fast, but seeing the strange behavior of the giant beast, he subconsciously thought it was very similar to Big Yellow. If he was not so nervous, he would have laughed out loud. The water cheelant sniffed for a while, but it was obvious that it didn't find anything. It raised its head and looked around, as if it couldn't figure out what was going on and was confused. But 1,000-year spirit beast is 1,000 years spirit beast after all. After thinking for a moment, it decided to give up. Water Kirin snorted, stared at Shah Danon with its large eyes. Shah Danon was scared half to death. It shook its head, wagged its tail, and walked into the pond. After a few moments, water splashed everywhere. Its giant body was submerged into the pond. Shah Danon calmed down a little, slowly climbed up. Then he realized the clothes on his back were all wet, not to mention the cold sweat on his forehead like rain. He walked over to the fire stick and picked it up. He looked it up and down, but he couldn't find anything strange about it. He couldn't help but complain loudly. What the hell? Before his voice died away, suddenly there was a sound of water. A big splash rose up. In a white splash, he could vaguely see Water Kirin's giant tail coming out of the water. Shah Danon was surprised, immediately put the fire stick into his clothes, and ran. Along the way, he could only hear the sound of water from the pond behind him. He did not dare to look back, just ran as far as possible. Not long after, he ran up the Rainbow Bridge and ran straight up until he could no longer hear the sound coming from behind him. Only when he reached the top of the Rainbow Bridge did he stop and gasp for breath. Huff, huff, huff. Shah Danon's breathing slowly calmed down, but he suddenly felt very tired, a kind of tiredness from the bottom of his heart. He lowered his head and saw, under the moonlight, a lonely shadow was following him. He suddenly raised his head, looked at the sky, saw the cold sky, a cold moon hanging high in the sky. He stared at it. For a moment he was stunned. Early morning, everyone woke up. Amanla rubbed his waist, complained loudly. Really, slept for one night, and my waist is about to break. How are we going to compete today? Fifth brother Ladaxon frowned. Sixth brother, don't make a fuss. I also slept for one night. I don't feel any problem with my waist. Xavion also said, That's right, sixth brother, you have complained for one night. Is it not enough? Didn't you see fifth brother? And Xiao Shitty did not make a sound? Amanla rolled his eyes, said, Fifth Shi Xiang's skin is thick. He did not feel anything. If you don't believe me, you can ask Xiao Shitty. Look at him. Hey, Xiao Shitty, why are your eyes bloodshot? Did you really not sleep well last night? Shah Danon tidied up the bed, sitting on a chair, staring at the window, without any reaction. Big Yellow was lying at his feet. Ash was rummaging through Big Yellow's fur, seemed to be looking for lice. Amandla walked over, heavily patted his shoulder. Shaw Danon jumped up. Big Yellow and Ash were also surprised. He looked around, said, "WH, what is it?" Amandla frowned. "Shao Fan, why are you so distracted? Did you not sleep well last night?" Shaw Danon was startled, shook his head. No. Amandla said, "Then why are your eyes bloodshot red?" When Shaw Danon was about to speak, he dodgy interrupted. "Six brother, don't be a busybody. It doesn't matter if Shao Shitty Spirit is not good. Anyway, today he will be absent. But if you don't wash up and delay the contest, you can't blame anyone else." Amandla suddenly realized, not caring whether Shaw Danon slept well or not. He rushed over, ignoring Elvi Dashin, Zhengdali, and others who were washing their faces, grabbed the wash basin, splashed water on his face, said, "Humph, Shao Shitty's life is good. Look at his face, sleeping like he's about to die. Really, Fifth Shi Xiang, give me back the wash basin. I don't have time. Bah, I haven't washed myself yet." Shaw Danon looked at his Shi Xiangs arguing over a wash basin on the other side of the room, felt a little annoyed, stood up, and walked out. When he reached the door, Xavion suddenly called from behind, "Shao Shitty, have you washed?" Shaw Danon turned his head, said, "Yes, to his Shi Xiang." Xavion nodded, said, "That's good. It doesn't matter if you go out for a walk, but after a while you need to go to the dining hall for breakfast, understand?" Shaw Danon answered, "Got it." While speaking, he walked out. Xiao Hui the monkey called out twice and scurried over to his shoulder. De Huang saw that Xiao Hui had left and also lazily crawled up, wagged its tail, and followed. In the hallway, Shaw Danon saw Jade and Shi Xiangs who had just woken up and were busy. He walked to Cloud Sea Square. It was still early. There were only a few Qing Yin disciples walking on the sea of clouds in twos and threes. The cool mountain wind blew past Shaw Danon's face, giving him a cold feeling. Like last night, Shaw Danon felt pain in his heart. He was already a 16-year-old boy, the first awakening of love. He had lived in Bamboo Peak for 5 years, living with Heidi day and night. Since young, deep in his heart, he had a deep love for this beautiful and lively Shiji. But last night, he witnessed Heidi and Kevern's secret meeting. It was like a bolt from the blue. His mind was in chaos. At this moment, his mind was in a mess, flashing back and forth with the heart-wrenching scenes from last night. He was like a wandering soul without a master, wandering aimlessly. Suddenly, a surprised voice came from his side, startled Shaw Danon. He woke up from his thoughts and looked at his side. It was a young Jadian disciple, handsome face, wearing a long robe, about 20 years old. In his hand, he was holding a golden fan. There seemed to be some mountains and rivers painted on it. He came closer, but his pair of bright eyes did not look at Shaw Danon, but stared at the monkey ash on Shaw Danon's shoulder. Chapter 34. The monkey Xiao Hui saw that the person in front of it was staring straight at it. Its gaze was very strange. It was in rage it flipped its monkey claw over. That person was caught off guard and almost had his face scratched. Luckily, his reaction was fast, forcefully tilted his head back, and dodged by a hair's breadth. Shaw Danon was surprised. He quickly stopped Ash. He turned to that person. That person was very frightened. His hand touched his face, his mouth said, "So close, so close." Shaw Danon felt sorry, said, "This Shi Xiang, I am sorry." But that person did not care. He smiled, waved his hand, "Don't worry. It was my negligence. I forgot Monkey Phantasm has a bad temper and easily hurts people." Shaw Danon startled. "Monkey Phantasm?" That person was shocked and said, "What? You don't know that this monkey is a three-eyed spiritual monkey?" Shaw Danon was puzzled. "What is Monkey Phantasm?" That person opened his eyes wide, looked at Shaw Danon, said, "You don't even know Monkey Phantasm. Why did you raise it?" Shaw Danon said, "I met it when I was chopping bamboo in the bamboo forest. It hit me several pine cones, then it followed me back." The young Jadian disciple's jaw almost dropped. He murmured, "Hit a few pine cones and follow me back. Hit a few pine cones and follow me back." Shaw Danon saw him acting strangely, shook his head, turned, and walked away. But after a few steps, that person followed him, with a smile on his face, said quietly, This shitty, oh no, Xixiang you dash. It was the first time Sha Danan was called Xixiang by someone. He was at least 20 years old. Sha Danan quickly said, "Oh, I don't deserve it. Just say what you want." That person paused for a moment, with a face full of smiles, said, "Haha, junior brother is really approachable. Ah, how about this? I will introduce myself first. My surname is Zeng. My name is Cursive Shu Shu. I am a disciple of Peak of the Wind. I don't know Shitty's name is." Sha Danan said, "I am Bamboo Peak Disciple Sha Danan. Sung Shi Xiang Yu." Uncle." That person startled, then blushed. He smiled embarrassedly. "Ah, I'm not trying to take advantage of you. My Shu Shu is a book, not an uncle of father. It's all my father's fault. Back then, my mother wanted to name me Ying Xiong. Do you think singing Xiong would be so stylish? But my father saw that I loved reading since I was young, so he named me Shu Shu on a whim." Sha Danan couldn't help but laugh. He thought that this person's name had the same meaning as sixth Shi Xiao. The sorrow in his heart was dispelled by this person. He felt closer to Tseng Shi Xiao, said, "Ah, Tseng Shi Xiao, you really like reading?" Zhang Shushu laughed and said, "Of course, I don't have to be modest about this. In the whole of Peak of the Wind, no one reads as many books as I do. But most of the books I read are about strange things, often making my father angry." "Ah, come to think of it, do you really not know that this monkey is a three-eyed spirit monkey?" Sha Danan shook his head, said, "I don't know. I thought it was a normal monkey." At this moment, as if it understood his words, Ash suddenly screamed and pulled Sha Danan's hair. Sha Danan cried out in pain, "I, a damn monkey." Zheng Shushu's eyes were full of envy as he said, "Ah, so smart." Sha Danan endured the pain. "This damn monkey loves to hit people, and you say it is smart?" Zheng Shushu said, "Don't be fooled by its appearance. Just based on its spirituality, it is a rare spiritual object. Look at its forehead between its eyes. Isn't there a small vertical scar?" Sha Danan turned his head and took a closer look. Under the gray fur, there was a light-colored vertical scar. He couldn't see it without looking carefully. He couldn't help but admire Tsing Shu Shu, said, "You can see it at such a small age. Amazing, amazing." Zhang Shushu said in all seriousness, "Don't underestimate it. I've seen it in the Spirit Beast chapter of Strange Gods and Demons. Note 2. The three-eyed monkey is a spiritual beast. When it's young, it looks no different from an ordinary monkey. But when it matures, the third spiritual eye on its forehead opens. Not only can it understand the 5 elements, it can also see things from 1,000 miles away. It said that the ancients saying 1,000 miles refers to this three-eyed monkey." Sha Danan held Ash in his arms and looked at it carefully. He couldn't believe the monkey that he had lived with for 2 years had such a great background. But no matter how he looked at it, it was just a normal and slightly fat monkey. It was quite heavy in his hand. It seemed it had gained a few kilograms in just one night at Peak of Widows. The monkey Xiao Hui felt strange. Why was it that everyone was staring at it nonstop today? Immediately, Z screeched incessantly, extremely angry. Sha Danan made a face at it, then threw it onto Big Yella's back. Big Yella was surprised and jumped away. When he saw it was Ash, he was relieved. Ash danced to Sha Danan like he was showing off. He stopped after several times and leaned on Big Yella. After a moment, his attention was attracted by the lice in Big Yella's fur. Issa looked at Ash with envy, then turned to Sha Danan. "Zhang Shitty, you also came to Peak of Widows for 7 Peaks tournament?" Sha Danan nodded. "Sung Shi Xiang, what about you?" Issa smiled. "Me too. Yesterday, I got number 33. I wonder what number you got. It can't be such a coincidence that we are today's opponents." Sha Danan also smiled, said, "I am number 1. Issa was surprised, said, "You were the disciple from Bamboo Peak yesterday?" Sha Danan blushed, nodded. Issa smiled. "Your luck is really good." Then he calculated in his mind, then said, "We can only meet each other in the final battle. It seems very difficult." Sha Danan smiled. "With my cultivation first. Hee, I will be eliminated in the second round. How can I dare to think about it?" Issa stuck out his tongue, said, "Then I am afraid I can't even pass the first round." The two of them looked at each other and laughed out loud. They talked for a while, then Xavion's voice came, "Xiao Fan, time to eat." Shah Danan answered from afar, said a few words to Issa, then ran toward them. Big Yella also carried Ash and followed. When they reached Xavion's place, the two of them walked forward. Xavion said, "Who were you talking to just now?" Shah Danan said, "Oh, I just met a Xixiang from Peak of the Wind. He said his name is Issa." Xavion seemed to be surprised and said, "Zheng Shu Shu?" Shah Danan was surprised. "What is it to Xixiang?" Xavion looked back and said, "That person is the head of the Peak of the Wind, Zheng Shu Chong, the only son of Uncle Tseng. I heard that he is talented and has a good memory. His cultivation is very deep, and he is one of the hot favorites in this competition." Shah Danan was surprised, couldn't say anything. After breakfast, the Jadian disciples came to Cloud Sea Square. It was a sea of people, shoulder to shoulder, bustling with people. It could be seen how prosperous Jadian is. In a huge square, during the time that everyone was eating, 8 large platforms had already been erected. They were built with huge logs that were as thick as a person's waist, and they were separated by more than 100 feet, arranged in the position of the 8 trigrams. At the moment, there were already a sea of people around the platform. In the middle of the largest Qian platform, there was a red list as tall as several people. On it, the names and signatures of the participating disciples were written in golden characters. Shah Danan's name was at the first place. The opponent's column was empty. Shah Danan blushed, peeked at the Xixiangs. They were all smiling. Only 6 Xixiang Amanla was complaining, "Not fair, not fair, not." "Shut up." A light shout was heard from the side. Everyone was shocked. Turned to look, it was Tian Bui and Saru bringing Tian Linger walking over together. The Bamboo Peak disciples quickly greeted, said, "Master, Shenyang." Tian Belize nodded and didn't say anything. Serene said, "The contest is about to begin. You must work hard, understand?" "Yes," everyone said in unison. Serene turned her head and looked at Shah Danan, but Shah Danan saw Hidi, who was next to Shenyang. She seemed to be more beautiful than usual, in high spirits. Her pair of beautiful eyes filled with smiles. One look and one new mood was very good. Shah Danan's heart was pricked by a needle. He lowered his head. "Xiao Fan." Serene saw her disciple's strange expression. She walked over and called him. Shah Danan quickly raised his head and said, "Yes, Shenyang." Serene looked at him, said, "Are you okay?" Shah Danan quickly shook his head, said, "It's okay, Shenyang." Serene looked at him again, said, "Xiao Fan, your luck is very good. Today, you don't have to participate, but you must pay attention to the Shi Xiang and Shiji's contest. This kind of opportunity is very rare. It will benefit you a lot. Understand?" Shah Danan nodded. "Yes, Shenyang." Serene looked at Tian Belize. Tian Belize nodded, turned, and walked down the stage. Everyone followed him and gradually merged into the crowd. Dang! A clear and melodious sound of a bell resounded, reverberating in the vast sea of clouds, rousing everyone's spirits. For a moment, the originally noisy square immediately quieted down. On the large stage in the middle, Master Doyle Shun and Master Vas Kalo appeared. Master Doyle Shun stepped forward, looked at the countless disciples, said loudly, "Contest begins." Then he waved his sleeve. The sound of the bell rang again. Dang, 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 resounded through the clouds. Shah Danan heard it. He suddenly felt his blood was boiling. He peeked at Hidi. Hidi was full of smile and eager to try. Once he looked, he could no longer move his eyes, and so he did not hear clearly what Reverend Daoxian said on the stage. After that, Taoist Song Song came out and said a few more words, and finally there was a clear and melodious sound of the bell cauldron, waking him up from his daze. Only then did he realize that the competition had already started. 63 people, 8 stages. Of course, they will be divided into 4 batches. In the first batch of 16 people, only Hidi from Bamboo Peak went up to fight. On the westerly stage, the Bamboo Peak disciples swarmed there. Tian Linger's opponent was a Morning Sun Peak disciple, surnamed Shun Tian Do. At this moment, he had already leaped up and landed on the arena. His figure was rather elegant and at ease, and the audience was even more cheering. Shah Danan looked at the Lee stage. There were more than 100 people around. Most of them were Sunrise Peak disciples. Even ahead of Sunrise Peak, Shang Zhengliang was watching. His face showed a faint smile. It was obvious he thought highly of Shintiendo. Tian Belize and others walked down the stage. The Bamboo Peak disciples were immediately drowned in the Sunrise Peak disciples. All around them were disciples wearing Sunrise Peak clothing. Tian Bui also did not care, glanced at Shang Zhengliang, who was standing far away. Shang Zhengliang also looked over at the same time. Their eyes met. There seemed to be faint sparks, but both of them only smiled faintly, as if nothing happened. At this time, there were already disciples bringing chairs for the two heads and Serene. Tian Belize and Serene sat down. Hidi came forward and said, "Dad, Mom, I'm going up." Tian Belize looked at his daughter and said, "Go." Serene's face was filled with love, said, "Be careful." Tian Linger took a look at the stage, smiled, without the slightest nervousness, said, "All of you, just wait for my good news." Then, she turned around. Her smile was still there. Her left hand made a sign, "Rise." Following her words, a burst of multicolored light flashed. The amber vermilion silk at her waist was already activated, shifted to her feet, lifted up Tian Linger's slender body, and the multicolored light, like a fairy, flew up to the stage. This move naturally far surpassed Shun Tian Do, jumping up the stage like a monkey. Furthermore, Tian Linger was as beautiful as a flower. The majority of the disciples below the stage, including Sunrise Peak, were male disciples. Immediately, thunderous applause sounded. Even many people below the stage turned their heads to look. Sha Danan and other Bamboo Peak disciples stood behind Tian Belize and Serene. Serene smiled and said to Tian Belize, "Looks like Hidi's cultivation has improved." Chapter 35. Tian Bui smiled, although he did not speak, but his expression was also quite happy. At this time, Tian Linger had already flown to the stage, about one zhang away from Shen Tiando, cupped her hands and said, "Shen Shixiang, please enlighten me." Shen Tiando saw Tian Linger drove her artifact onto the stage, and saw that the artifact was glowing, immortal aura rising. Most likely it was the Big Bamboo Peak Elder Suru's famous artifact, Phoenix Soul. He did not dare to be negligent, cupped his hands and said, "Tian Shimmy, please show mercy." As he spoke, he took a step back. His right hand made a sword gesture. A 3-chi celestial sword emitting a grayish-brown light appeared and held horizontally in front of him. Suru below the stage frowned, whispered to Tian Bui, "This sword is the same as Ling Air's Phoenix Soul. Both are earth element esper of the 5 elements. This time, it will depend on which of them has a deeper level of cultivation." Tian Bui smiled, said, "Among the earth attribute artifacts in Qingyun's sect, which one can compare to your Phoenix Soul? In my opinion, that immortal sword is worlds apart from your amber vermilion soul." Suru quietly spat, said, "Only knows how to talk nonsense." At this time, a bell rang on the stage. Tian Linger and Shun Tiando's match officially began. Tian Linger was obviously young and impetuous. The moment the bell stopped, she immediately used her hand to point forward. In an instant, glowing light flashed, as fast as lightning. The Phoenix Soul brought up a gust of strong wind, scratching his face painfully, and rushed towards Shen Tiando. Shen Tiando did not expect Tian Linger to attack immediately. Seeing the Phoenix Soul rushing over in a blink of an eye, he hurriedly took 2 steps back. Both hands shook. The celestial sword in front of him immediately shone brilliantly and went up to meet it. The glowing light and the grayish-brown light collided in the middle of the stage. With a bang sound, Tian Linger and Shun Tiando's body both trembled, but immediately stood firm. The 2 artifacts also in a deadlock in midair. Below the stage, Tian Bui frowned. Suru was also surprised, at this Shun Tiando's cultivation is not low. At the same time, the Sunrise Peak disciples shouted in unison, "Good!" These hundreds of people's shouts were indeed extraordinary, immediately suppressed the Big Bamboo Peak disciples who were also cheering. Sixth Amandla snorted, said, "Just because the voice is loud? It's not a competition of voices." At this moment, on the stage, the two treasures were in a stalemate for a while. Both of them were equally matched. Shun Tian-do stood on the Big Dipper with a serious expression on his face. He mumbled something and then shouted, "Quick!" His gray-brown celestial sword soared up in the air. The next moment, as fast as lightning, swiftly struck down from above Tian Linger's head. Before the sword reached the ground, Tian Linger's dress fluttered. The surrounding strong wind blew. Tian Linger, however, did not panic and did not have the slightest intention of retreating. Her left hand grabbed the amber vermilion soul that flew back to her and pulled it above her head. Immediately, the multicolored light was like muslin. The amber vermilion soul instantly widened by more than a few times, weaving a multicolored light screen above her head. In the blink of an eye, under Shun Tian-do's solemn expression, the immortal sword struck the red light again. The red light trembled violently, but it was safe and sound. Suru then heaved a sigh of relief, whispered to Tian Bi, "Ling ere this child, so arrogant." Tian Bui snorted and shook his head. Shun Tian-do's gray-brown, celestial sword did not hit its target and retracted upwards, but Tian Linger did not stop at all. Where the amber vermilion soul flashed, it immediately grew by 10 times. Tian Linger gave a delicate shout. The amber vermilion soul changed from its original soft appearance and became a long, huge stick, perfectly straight in the air. One end grabbed in Tian Linger's hand. The spectators below the stage were in an uproar, exclamations lingering. Tian Linger did not hesitate. Her right hand waved. The amber vermilion soul transformed into that huge stick streaked across the air with a woo sound, heavily striking towards Shun Tian-do's head. Shun Tian-do frowned tightly, his face solemn. At this moment, his celestial sword had already flown back to his hand, but he clenched his teeth, his right hand holding the celestial sword tightly. His left hand stretched out. The huge stick was about to hit his head. The crowd below the stage held their breath. Suddenly a loud sound. On the platform in front of him, the originally flat wooden platform instantly cracked. 5, 6 huge rocks suddenly broke out of the platform and blocked in front of him. Below the stage, Tian Bui and Suru's expressions changed slightly. On the contrary, Morning Sun Peak leader Zhang Liang nodded repeatedly. A loud sound was heard. The glowing huge stick and the rocks collided heavily. In a moment, dust flew up, pervading the entire stage. Tian Linger only felt her body shaking violently. The opponent's Imperial Rock technique was actually indestructible. The amber vermilion soul rebounded back. The dust had not settled. Shun Tian-do's face was slightly pale, but he did not stop. A loud roar from his throat. His body floated to the huge rock, both hands holding the sword hilt. The gray-brown celestial sword shone brightly. In a moment, pierced into the extremely hard rock, like a hot knife cutting through butter. Ka-ka-ka! A few muffled and hoarse cracking sounds were heard. Tian Linger's countenance changed. She felt that the ground beneath her feet was shaking incessantly. Suddenly, another few loud sounds. The wooden planks where Tian Linger was standing were all broken. In the sound, numerous huge and sharp rocks shot out from the ground, piercing the place where Tian Linger was standing. Not a single piece was left unscathed. Sha Danan, who was below the stage, cried out, but immediately shut his mouth. Tian Bui and his wife's expression also became serious. Suru was even a bit nervous. On the contrary, the Morning Sun Peak disciples were cheering loudly. The applause was thunderous. Shen Xiang, good job. Really powerful. Victory! The cheers came one after another. The stage was also filled with dust. It was almost difficult to see anything, but Shun Tian-do, who was standing high on the huge rock, did not have a trace of relaxation. His eyes were wide open, carefully searching the surroundings. As expected, after a while, in the thick dust cloud above the huge rock ahead, a ray of light suddenly flashed. In that instant, the light burst out. Tian Linger, like a red phoenix, suddenly flew out, the amber vermilion ray flowing with light, spinning rapidly nonstop, circling beside her. Tian Linger's face was solemn. Her almond-shaped eyes shot out a frightening cold glint. Both of her hands clutched the spell, and then heavily waved downwards. The amber vermilion silk suddenly stopped, like a venomous snake pierced straight into the ground and drilled into those hard rocks. Shen Tiando's expression changed greatly. Without thinking, immediately floated back. Sure enough, just as he left, the originally poisonous snake-like amber vermilion soul, at this moment, like a huge red dragon, fiercely rushed out from the ground. The place where Shen Tiando was just standing, sand and stones flew away. A large hole was opened. The momentum was so fierce, it made people shiver. Tian Linger's body was in midair. Her left and right hands made the orchid incantation sign. Crossed in front of her chest, her mouth shouted, "God bind." The amber vermilion soul paused in midair, a crisp sound. Instantly the ray of light flourished, grew with the wind. In just a moment, it was unknown how many times it grew, as if it covered the sky and covered the sun, swiftly pierced through, or circled in the air, or rushed into the ground, and broke out from the other side. With Shen Tiando as the center, countless red silk tightly surrounded him. The Big Bamboo Valley people could not help but look at each other. 2 years ago, when Tian Linger and Lin Jingyu were fighting, she had used this Godbind strange skill. Today it seemed this Godbind power was even greater, both in the sky and on the ground. How would this Shen Tiando compare to Lin Jingyu at that time? Following Tian Linger's incantation, the amber vermilion soul turned into a huge red ball, pressing inwards unceasingly. In that gap, under the rays of light, a grayish-brown light could be seen indistinctly. It was obvious that Shen Tiando was still resisting tenaciously, but although the red silk was resisted and slowed down, it still pressed inwards irresistibly. There was silence below the stage. The Sunrise Peak disciples all shut their mouths, nervously looking at the huge red ball on the stage. Everyone knew, under the celestial magical weapon's heavy pressure, if one could not withstand it, what would be the consequence? The red silk had now shrunk to 6 feet. The rays of light flashed, completely suppressing the grayish-brown light. From time to time, there were sounds of pressure. At this time, the crowd could not even see Shen Tiando's figure clearly, and Tian Linger still stopped in midair, her face slightly flushed, the orchid incantation in her left and right hands slightly trembling. After a short while, the amber vermilion soul slowly pressed inwards another foot. Everyone was so nervous that they almost could not breathe. At this moment, a strange cry was heard. Shen Tiando was like a ferocious tiger, holding a sword and breaking through the silk, but at this moment his face was completely pale. The Sunrise Peak disciples below the stage cheered thunderously, but the seat of honor Shang Zhengliang closed his eyes and sighed, while Tian Bui and his wife sitting on the other side looked at each other and smiled. Sure enough, this was Shen Tiando's final struggle. Tian Linger in midair, her right hand pointed, the amber vermilion soul, like an awl attached to the bone, followed closely, striking towards Shen Tiando's back. And at this moment, Shen Tiando seemed to even have difficulty turning around. He moved, but did not dodge, was lightly struck by the amber vermilion soul from the back. Immediately his whole body flew forward. With a bang, sound fell off the stage. The Sunrise Peak disciples below the stage cheered halfway. Suddenly, as if mute, there was no sound. Shang Zhengliang stood up, shook his head, and shouted to the disciple beside him, "Still not going to help Shen Shixiang up?" The Sunrise Peak disciples then came to their senses. One after another ran up to help Shen Tiando up. At this time, Tian Linger kept her magical weapon, landed below the stage, smiled, and said to Shen Tiando, "Thank you, Shen Shixiang, for being lenient." Shen Tiando looked at her, smiled bitterly, said, "Tian Shimi is a genius. Admirable, admirable." Then he let the people next to him help him to the side. Shang Zhengliang walked over, took a few more glances at Tian Linger, spoke to Tian Bui and his wife who were walking over. Tian's senior brother, although niece's age is young, but in terms of cultivation, she actually has such innate aptitude. It really makes one envious. Tian Bai's face was proud, but his mouth was smiling, said, "You flatter me, flatter me." Serene also smiled, said, Shang Xixiang's house is full of talented people. I believe there are more powerful masters who have not appeared yet. Shang Zhengliang dismissed it with a smile. Tian Bui did not ask more, turned around and walked back. At this time, Tian Linger returned to where the Bamboo Peak disciples were, immediately surrounded by them. The disciples were all smiling happily, wishing they could drown Tian Linger with all their praises. Tian Linger beamed with joy. Sha Danan was even happier. Tian Bui and his wife came back. Tian Linger immediately rushed to Serene, pulled her arm, smiled, said, "How is it, mother? I am powerful, right?" Suru rolled her eyes at her, but in the end, she still laughed and said, "Impressive, impressive." Tian Bui was also full of smiles. After all, his daughter had made a good start. His face was full of pride. In front of his fellow disciples, he also stretched out his hand and patted his daughter's head, as if to praise her. However, he immediately turned his head and said to the other disciples, "Next up will be you guys." With Ling as an example, you can also see that the disciples of the other factions are not necessarily unreachable. Later on, all of you must also work hard. Everyone said at the same time, "Yes." Sha Danan also shouted with the others, and shouted especially loudly. Seeing the others had gone to prepare, Tian Bui and Serene separated to watch the matches. Serene saw Sha Danan was still standing there, so she told him to watch carefully, then left. Sha Danan thought for a moment, decided to find Tian Linger and find a stage with her to cheer for Xixiao. Suddenly, he saw Tian Linger was walking quickly among the crowd. In front of her, Kevin was standing there, smiling at her. Sha Danan's heart immediately sank. Tian Linger walked in front of Keheo, giggled, and said a few words to him. Keheo's face was full of smiles, and kept talking to Tian Linger's ear. Tian Linger also kept laughing. Both of them looked extremely happy. After chatting and laughing for a while, the two of them walked away together, seemingly choosing a stage to watch the competition. Sha Danan stood there, lost in thought. He felt a great sadness and disappointment rose in his heart. All of his boiling blood cooled down, chilled to the bottom of his heart. Note 1. Strange Tales of Gods and Demons, Spirit Beast Chapter, Squinting Eyes Face, Three Eyes Monkey, came from Mount Meru in the west. Intelligent and mischievous. Lived more than 1,000 years. Open spirit eyes, able to see 1,000 miles. Able to control grass, wood, earth, and stone. Used to be the protector of Dipankara Buddha. Note 2. Strange Tales of Gods and Demons, Ancient Book. Recorded strange phenomena of heaven and earth, rare treasures, rare beasts, demons, and spirits. Written by ancient person Xiao Ding. Original book has 10 chapters. Most of them are lost, only 4 exist. Also note, Xiao Ding is not recorded in history. Unofficial history Jiao Fengshan's notes, Chronicles of Mountains and Rivers, Ancient Xiao, Birth and Death are unknown. From a young age, he was intelligent and would never forget what he saw. Traveled the world, visited famous mountains and ancient lakes. Wrote Strange Tales of Gods and Demons, 10 chapters. Fantastic and beautiful, the #1 book in the world. Chapter 36. Haha Zhang Shitty. Suddenly, Sha Danan's shoulder was heavily patted. Sha Danan's attention was on Heidi. He did not notice what was happening next to him. He was surprised and jumped to the side. It was Issa he just met this morning. Issa was smiling, relaxed. He looked at Sha Danan. Then his eyes moved to Ash. Ash saw the annoying guy, ran to him again. It was very unwilling. It made a face, then jumped onto Big Yella's back and patted Big Yella's head. Big Yella stared at Sha Danan and Issa, barked twice, then ran away. Sha Danan frowned, called, "Ash, come back, don't run around." Issa smiled. "Don't be afraid. Monkey Phantasm is very smart, it won't get lost." Sha Danan shrugged, turned his head, and was about to talk to Issa. Suddenly, he saw Big Yella was carrying Ash and running to the kitchen. His heart skipped a beat. He said, "Ah, damn monkey you were going to." Zheng Shushu asked curiously, "Why?" Sha Danan coughed, laughed. "No, nothing." "Right, Sung Shi Xiao. Aren't you going to participate in the contest?" How come you have time to find me? Issa smiled. Oh, I have finished the contest. Since I have nothing to do, I saw you are here, so I came to say hi. Shah Danon was surprised, said, What? You have finished the contest? What is the result? Issa closed the fan in his hand, rubbed the black hair on his head, said, accidentally won a round, heh. Shah Danon saw his casual look. It did not look like he had just experienced a big fight. He carefully asked, Sang Shi Xiao, is your cultivation very high? Issa immediately waved his hand. Zhang Shidi, what are you talking about? My little cultivation is not good enough. If it wasn't for my father always forcing me to cultivate, I wouldn't have bothered to cultivate the Tao of refinement. Every day I would go to raise flowers, feed birds, and read books. What kind of carefree life is that? But then again, he put his hand on Shah Danon's shoulder and led him forward, whispered, I didn't expect there would be someone worse than me in this Seven Peaks tournament. Shah Danon smiled bitterly, said, There are many worse than you. Zhang Shushu shrugged his shoulders and said without a care in the world, So what if I have more? No matter how greedy I am, I don't dare to think that I can win in the end. However, I am very interested in that three-eyed monkey of yours. Hee, junior brother Zhang. Why don't you, Shah Danon saw his cunning face, immediately said, Sang Shi Xiang, don't have any idea about my ash. Zhang Shushu paused, rolled his eyes, and said, Then I will use something to exchange with you. You don't know, on the peak of the wind, I raise a lot of interesting and rare animals, such as three-legged rabbits, black and white peacocks, shellless turtles, and winged snakes. Shah Danon couldn't help but ask, Are there really so many strange things? Zhang Shushu proudly said, That goes without saying. In order to collect these treasures, I spent a lot of time and effort. I also suffered a lot of scolding from my father. However, I still like your three-eyed monkey. How about it? What do you like? I'll give it to you. Shah Danon shook his head. No, I only raise ash because it is destined to be with me. Besides the black and white rabbits, shellless peacocks you gave me, Zhang immediately corrected. Three-legged rabbits, black and white peacocks, shellless turtles. Shah Danon stuck out his tongue, said, Oh, yes, but I'm not interested in those. Don't exchange. Zhang rolled his eyes again, pulled Shah Danon to a secluded place, looked around, then whispered, Zhang Shidi, I will show you something good. See if you like it? Then he took out a thick book with a blue cover and handed it to Shah Danon. Shah Danon took a look. There was not even a name on the book. The cover was old. It seemed like it had been around for a long time. Looking at Zhang Shushu's appearance, he seemed to be fine on the surface, but his pair of quick-witted eyes were constantly glancing around, looking very vigilant. His originally delicate and pretty face now looked a little strange and even wretched. It seemed that this book was either a record of a peerless technique or a rare copy. Shah Danon shook his head, said, Sang Shi Xiang, I can't accept such a precious book. Also, my talent is too poor. It is useless to me. I also don't want to exchange it with ash. Just keep it. Issa glared at him, whispered, If you don't want to read it, then say so. Let's read it first. Soon. Shah Danon saw Shah Danon's strange look, couldn't help but be curious about the book. He opened it and was startled. His face and ears blushed. In this thick book, aside from a large amount of words, there were many pictures. The pictures were all naked men and women hugging. It was a book of eroticism. It was the first time Shah Danon had seen such a thing. The drawing style of the book was exquisite. The characters were vivid. His heart jumped. He couldn't help but said, Sang Shi Xiang, why do you have such thing? Sure. Issa was surprised. He quickly snatched the book and put it in his pocket. Then he carefully looked at the disciples walking around. He glared at Shah Danon and said, Don't be so loud. Shah Danon realized, but he was still shocked. He whispered, Sang Shi Xiang, why do you know how to read this book? Issa curled his lips, said, So what if I read it? Let me tell you, this is a rare book. I heard it is the only copy. I have spent a lot of effort to get it. I guarantee that after you read it, you will be able to win the hearts of the women in the world. How about it? Use it to exchange for your ash. Shah Danon immediately shook his head. No. Issa said angrily, This won't do. That won't do. Tell me what you want. Shah Danon honestly said, I don't want anything. Zhang Shushu was at his wit's end and spat. Why are you like a piece of wood? Sha Danan laughed. He didn't mind it. His eyes couldn't help but look at the distance. Between the white clouds, a beautiful figure was faintly discernible. Zhang Shushu gave up and put the book away. Shua! He opened his fan again and fanned himself twice. Suddenly, he heard the ringing of bells and cauldrons in the distance. It seemed like another competition was about to begin. Issa looked at that direction, smiled, pulled Sha Danan, said, Come, I will take you to see the most popular person in Jadian in this contest. Sha Danan startled, surprised. Who is it? Paused. Then his face darkened, said, Is it Dragonhead Peak's Kevern Shixiao? Issa was surprised. He looked at Sha Danan with surprise, but still shook his head. Qi Shixiao's cultivation is of course very famous. But didn't you hear, the most popular person this time is another person? Sha Danan thought for a moment, then asked, Who? Issa seemed to have forgotten the argument just now. His face was full of smile, said mysteriously, You will know if you come with me. Then she pulled Sha Danan and walked forward. Sha Danan could not help himself, but he was curious about the so-called mysterious person, so he followed. Issa led Sha Danan to the largest stage, Qian stage. Sha Danan followed behind him. Below the stage, there was a sea of Jadian disciples. There were at least 400 to 500 people. Sha Danan calculated in his mind. He estimated at least half of the Jadian disciples were gathered below the stage, especially the younger generation of male disciples. As the two of them walked nearer, they heard the hubbub getting louder and louder. Surrounding them were Qinyan disciples discussing excitedly. Small bamboo height has always produced beauties. I heard this time Anan is hailed as the most outstanding beauty in 500 years. Needless to say, that day I saw her in Crystal Hall. She's really beautiful. Aya, who hit my head, Shurshu. A white-bearded old man said angrily, Little bastard, you are a cultivator, your heart should be like still water. How can you be so greedy for beauty? If you're on the stage, you will only look at that face and lose before you even do anything. Yes, that is why I've already told head Shixiao, beauty is the source of trouble. We Jadian should not accept female disciples. Ahem, Shurshu, you are really, wise and wise. But isn't your voice a bit too loud? What's wrong? Did I say something wrong? The white-bearded old man glared at him, his voice rising a few octaves. No, the young disciples quickly surrounded him, smiled and whispered, Shurshu, Master Shui Yu is sitting inside. Lowering his voice, the old man said, If not because we are from the same faction, I would have already, all the disciples agreed in unison, praising the old mister for his profound cultivation and magnanimity, for not haggling over petty juniors. Issa and Sha Danan looked at each other. Issa shrugged. Sha Danan whispered to him, Is that person you're talking about Bamboo, Haichiji? Zhang Shushu nodded, glanced at the stage, and said, It hasn't started yet. You'll know how famous she is in a while. But, alas, there are too many people here. While speaking, the two of them turned around, but they were still circling around the periphery of the crowd. The inside had long been filled with layers upon layers of Qinyan disciples. Even a needle could not get in. Sha Danan was getting more and more curious. It seemed like this mysterious person was really popular. So many Jadian disciples were attracted here. Issa's face was filled with anxiety. His mouth kept saying, Oh no, there are no good seats left. I should have come here last night to line up. Sha Danan was surprised. Before he could say anything, Issa's eyes brightened. He saw dozens of Peak of Wind disciples standing in front of him. Without saying anything, he pulled Sha Danan and rushed toward them. The Peak of Wind disciples saw it was Issa. They all smiled. One of the tall men laughed. Ho ho, you are late. Issa ignored him, pulled Sha Danan, and squeezed into the crowd. The Peak of Wind disciples were very nice to Issa. They all moved aside, and Sha Danan also squeezed into the crowd. Not long after, they squeezed into the inner circle. The view was really good. There were 7 or 8 people sitting closest to the stage. The head of Jadian, Master Dao Shun, head of Dragonhead Peak, Master Vaskalo, and head of Bamboo Height, Master Shui, you were all there. The others were most likely the famous elders of each house. And behind them stood the Jadian disciples. The most eye-catching were the beautiful bamboo height disciples standing behind Master Shui Yu. Ba Min, whom Sha Danan knew, was also among them, and the one closest to Master Shui was the blue-dressed beauty who drew lots at Crystal Hall yesterday. At this moment she was still as cold as ice, incomparably beautiful, attracting countless gazes. See that? That's her. Issa nudged Sha Danan with his arm, signaled him to look at the blue-dressed beauty. Sha Danan looked at the girl a few more times, said quietly, "She is the popular you mentioned?" Zhang Shu had an intoxicated look, said, "She might not be the most popular. I heard that Lu Sweki has not been in the sect for long. Her cultivation is hard to predict, but everyone says that in terms of beauty, she is definitely the most beautiful." Sha Danan frowned, said, "Sang Shi Xiang, you look very wretched when you are drooling." "Issa? Kiki, do I? Haha, you must have seen it wrong. Right, look at our Shi Xiangs around us." Sha Danan looked around. Among the Jadian disciples, most of their eyes were on the beauties of bamboo height, especially the blue-dress girl Anan. She was the most eye-catching, but it seemed like the beauties were already used to it. They were calm. Anan was expressionless, cold as ice. It was like she did not see the male disciples behind her. Issa swallowed, whispered to Sha Danan, "That is no wonder. We Jadian have been recruiting young disciples. Look around. There are at least 300 or 400 people like us. Haha, our cultivation is not high, so we are easily tempted." Chapter 37. Sha Danan glanced at him. Issa's handsome face changed. Thinking of the book, he felt a lust was written on Issa's forehead. Zhang Shu turned around and said in surprise, "Junior brother Zhang, why don't you look at them? You're always looking at me." "It's because we hit it off, and I treat you as a friend that I brought you here." "All right, who do you think has the best figure among them?" Sha Danan immediately turned his head, added the word wolf to his evaluation of Issa. At this moment, the noisy crowd suddenly quieted down. Under everyone's watchful eyes, Lu Sweki stepped forward, bowed to Shui Wen Master sitting on the chair. Shui Wen Master lightly nodded, said, "Go." Anan answered, straightened her clothes. Her right hand held the incantation mark. Her pair of bright eyes looked at the stage. At this moment, the faint cloud that was originally under her feet suddenly whirled and gathered towards her from all directions. Very quickly, a white cloud formed under Anan's feet, and then, Anan like a fairy, her whole person in this white cloud, slowly rose, floated in mid-air, moved to the stage. The mountain breeze blew. The pure white clouds were like the softest and most beautiful silk. Anan's clothes fluttered. Her skin was like snow. Her beauty was indescribable, like a fairy from the 9 heavens descending to the mortal world, making people feel pity for her and also a bit of respect. After a moment, thunderous applause came from below the stage. Sha Danan was caught off guard. His ears were ringing. He was surprised. He did not expect Anan to be so popular. But then again, when he looked at the beautiful figure in mid-air, his heart was still moved, unable to control himself. It was hard to imagine there is such a beautiful person in the world. Master Shui Yue, who was sitting below the stage, her face, which had always been cold, right now also had a smile. After a moment, a young disciple walked onto the stage because no one noticed. Square face, thick eyebrows. His appearance was decent, but he looked a little excited. Once on the stage, he said to Anan, "Lu Shimi, I am Dragonhead Peak's disciple Fong Chao. Today I have the honor to spar with Shimi. It is the honor of 3 lifetimes." "Sure." The audience booed. Lu Sweki was expressionless, said coldly in the air, "Fong Xixiang is too polite. I am Small Bamboo Valley 8th generation disciple Lu Sweki. Today, I seek advice from Fong Xixiang." Sha Danan stood under the stage, looking at Anan, who was like a fairy in mid-air. His heart suddenly felt pain. Just a moment ago, Hidi Shiji was also standing in mid-air like this. In a trance, Anan's figure seemed to overlap with Hidi's figure. Fong Chao was still chattering on the stage. It seemed like if he could continue to talk like this, he would not mind the competition until the end of time. Fortunately, There were a lot of people who were against him. Before he could finish, countless people, including Issa, shouted angrily, "Are you still not going to start? Pervert, chattering like a woman. This senior sister of small bamboo height. What are you doing? I definitely don't have any other intentions." Dang. The final bell finally rang. Lu Sueki's face turned cold as she looked straight at Fong Chao. Fong Chao was stared at by her cold eyes and felt a chill down his spine. Although from here, even with her cold face, she was still as cold as ever. But no matter what, he did not dare to joke anymore. He quickly put away his smile and straightened his mind. With a gesture of his right hand, a silver-white, immortal sword appeared in his hand. Sha Danan frowned. Remembered Kevern's sword, Frozen Ice. Issa snorted, said quietly, "Dragonhead Peak's people have Kevern as an example. They all like to practice this kind of sword." Sha Danan's eyes flashed, looked around, but he could not find Kevern. Not to mention the person he wanted to see the most, but did not want to see the most. Where did they go? Sha Danan lowered his head. His heart was sad. Suddenly, Zheng Shushu pulled his arm and said happily, "Xiao Fan, look, it's starting." Sha Danan looked up at the stage and saw that Fong Chao had already taken out his celestial sword. The stage was instantly filled with cold air. But in Sha Danan's eyes, he instinctively discovered that compared to Kevern, who had fought with Tian Belize in the past, Fong Chao's control of ice celestial arts was clearly still lacking. On the other hand, Anan was still standing expressionlessly on the floating cloud, watching Fong Chao channeling his energy to form ice in front of her. She did not seem to have any intention to attack. On her back was a celestial sword in a sky-blue scabbard. Although this celestial sword could not fuse with its owner like most other celestial swords, from Fong Chao on the stage to all the Blue Cloud sect disciples below the stage, no one dared to look down on it. In the cultivation world, the psychic esper can fuse with its master after a long time of cultivation. It can only be used when it is needed. It is very convenient. But some strange esper, because its spirituality is too strong, the human body cannot bear it. It cannot do this and can only be carried by the master. But this kind of esper is usually the most powerful esper. The higher the cultivation of the master, the more powerful it is. Jadian's most powerful esper, Ancient Sword Retribution, belongs to this category. On the stage, the area 3 feet around Fong Chao was covered with a thin layer of ice. The disciples, such as Sha Danan and Issa, could feel the cold air on their faces. But Anan, who was still standing in midair, did not seem to care about it. She only looked at Fong Chao coldly. Fong Chao was performing a one-man show in front of everyone, his immortal sword dancing in the air. From the corner of his eyes, he could see the hundreds of gazes below the stage. But Lu Sueki's gaze seemed to be even colder than the cold air emitted by his immortal sword. It was so cold that he felt as if he had nowhere to put his hands and feet. Fong Chao was a little anxious. He pointed with his right hand. The silver sword shot toward Anan. He shouted, "Lu Shimmy, be careful." The crowd burst into laughter. Looking at Fong Chao's expression, it was as if he was afraid of hurting Anan. Master Vasp Kalo, who was sitting below the stage, had an ugly expression, snorted heavily. The snort was filled with disdain. The person next to him heard it and immediately reacted. "What? Vasp Kalo Shixiang seems to be dissatisfied?" Master Vasp Kalo did not turn his head, said lightly, "Shui Yu Shimi, your disciples are really beautiful." Shuiwa Master's countenance changed. During this contest, Taoist Song Song did not praise her sex disciples' cultivation, but praised the lady's beauty. Obviously, there was sarcasm. Shuiwa Master was such a person, both her brows raised, immediately said, "I also did not know that under Qing Yun's sex cultivation, there are actually so many lechers. Master Vaskalo was angry. He was about to retort, but Master Doyle Shun raised his hand and smiled. All right. You are already hundreds of years old. Don't be afraid of losing face by arguing in front of so many disciples. Watch the contest. The two chiefs snorted heavily and turned their heads away. Fong Chao's silver immortal sword had already shot to the cloud beneath Anan Sweki's feet. Anan Sweki's cold face did not have a trace of expression, and she did not move at all. The cloud beneath her feet carried her body backwards, but Fong Chao's immortal sword was even faster. In the blink of an eye, it had already caught up. Screams and sighs could be heard from below the stage. At this critical moment, Anan flipped her hand, and the sword on her back appeared in her hand. Her face was as cold as ice, and she did not even unsheath the sword. She only used the sky-blue sword to block in front of her. Clang! The clear echo reverberated in the square. It was very pleasing to the ear. Fong Chao's silver sword seemed to have received a heavy blow. It bounced back. Master Vasp Kalo's face changed greatly. In the crowd's surprised eyes, Anan did not hesitate. A faint blush flashed across her face. Her right hand threw the sky-blue sword along with its scabbard. At the same time, her right hand's 5 fingers stretched out. She held the spell tightly. The sky-blue sword immediately shone brightly in the air. The blue light covered the entire stage. The celestial energy was rising. It was obviously not an ordinary weapon. Fong Chao did not dare to be slow. The dazzling blue light covered the sky and earth. He was shocked. At the same time, he was furious that Anan did not even unsheath her sword and look down on him. But his hand still activated the sword. In a blink of an eye, 3 ice walls were formed in front of him. In the air, Anan's eyes were as bright as stars. Her black hair fluttered in the wind. Her beauty was unparalleled and captivating. She seemed to be chanting an incantation in a low voice, and there was no expression on her cold face. Following her gaze, everyone only saw the celestial sword that was flying in the air at this moment, emitting a loud sound, like the roar of a ferocious beast, shaking the surroundings. In an instant, the blue light shone brightly, and the celestial sword seemed to break through the sky, like a wild dragon coming out of the abyss, and all the clouds within a radius of more than 100 feet were forced to dissipate in an instant, without a trace. Amidst the 10,000 rays of blue light in the deepest part of the sky, the celestial sword seemed to have descended from the sky, shooting toward Fong Chao with unparalleled ferocity. Fong Chao's expression was solemn. Sweat dripped from his forehead. He was obviously shocked by the power of Anan's blue sword. In an instant, the sword was already in front of him. Ka. Under the dumbfounded gazes of the hundreds of Azure Sky disciples, the 3 ice walls formed by Fong Chao were like tofu, as the blue immortal sword rushed in as if they were nothing and smashed into pieces. Fong Chao was shocked. With his strength, it was not that he could not form more ice walls as defense, but he thought that 3 would be enough. Unexpectedly, Anan's skills were so profound. That blue celestial sword was even more powerful. In a blink of an eye, it was before him. At the moment of life and death, Fong Chao barely steadied his mind. The silver-white sword glowed. He guarded in front of him and activated the white light shield. The next moment, Anan's blue sword had already collided with the white light shield. Boom! The deafening sound was like the wild thunder in the horizon, rumbling over the enormous and invisible shock wave with the 2 celestial swords as the center, rapidly spread out. All of the Qingyan disciples standing below the stage immediately felt a strong wind blowing against their faces. Their entire body involuntarily took a step back, and the entire circle of spectators at the same time also expanded by a circle. Everyone's expression changed. They were shocked by the power of the immortal treasures that they had never seen before. After the moment of astonishment, everyone's gaze returned to the stage. Lu Sweki had unknowingly landed on the stage, and the immortal sword had already returned to her hand along with its scabbard. The blue and white light gradually dissipated, but everyone noticed that Fong Chao's face was as pale as a sheet. Fong Chao slowly raised his head and pointed at Lu Sweki. His voice became hoarse for some reason. Everyone was bewildered, not knowing what was going on. Suddenly, something strange happened. The silver-white immortal sword that had been in front of Fong Chao since the beginning suddenly emitted a few muffled sounds. Then, Under countless gazes, a crack suddenly appeared on the sword's body, and then it rapidly expanded. A moment later, the immortal sword let out a pained cry, and with a dong sound, it broke into two pieces and fell onto the stage. There was silence on and off the stage. Everyone held their breath. Above the sea of clouds, there was no one who did not know what an immortal sword that had been trained for a long time meant to a cultivator. Wah! On the stage, Feng Chao spat out a mouthful of blood. He held his chest. His face showed pain. He could no longer hold on. He fell to the ground and fainted. Chapter 38. Many people from the long show peak immediately rushed onto the stage and helped Feng Chao up. Looking at the two halves of the immortal sword on the ground, their faces were filled with rage. They glared at Lu Sweki as if they wanted to eat her alive. Below the stage, Master Vaskalo clenched his fist, said coldly, "Shui Yushimi, this disciple of yours is really cruel. It is not enough to win, but she still used her divine esper to destroy his sword. What kind of logic is that?" Master Shui Yu's face was indifferent, said coldly, "Shui Yushimi's cultivation is too shallow. Unable to control a divine esper like Aeolian Firmus is not a big deal." Master Vaskalo was about to explode in anger. Suddenly a hand was placed on his shoulder. It was Master Doyle Shun who stood up and patted his shoulder. Taoist Vaskalo looked at him, finally suppressed his anger, snorted heavily, strode away. Master Doyle Shun looked at Master Vaskalo's back, shook his head, and smiled bitterly. He turned around and was about to speak, but Master Shui Yu also walked away. At this time, Lu Sweki had already walked down from the stage and came in front of Shui Yu. Shui Yu looked at her, a smile on her face, and nodded. Lu Sweki did not speak, bowed slightly, stood behind Shui Yu, and followed her away. Sha Danan stood at the side. He recovered from the shocking battle. Watching Shui Yu and Anan, the master and disciple, walking away, he suddenly realized they were so similar. Both as cold as ice, like they were carved from the same mold. While he was lost in thought, Issa sighed, said, "Can't believe a divine esper like Aeolian Firmus is also born." Sha Danan was puzzled, asked, "What is Aeolian Firmus?" The Jadian disciples gradually dispersed. Issa greeted the Peak of Wind disciples, then walked away with Sha Danan. He said, "Aeolian Firmus is the sword that you saw Anan use. I've read about it in the 10 chapters on rare treasures. The Aeolian firmaments first appeared in the hands of an itinerant immortal, Monk Ku Exant, 1,000 years ago. Legend has it that this magical weapon was a rare metal from the 9 heavens that fell into the mortal world. Monk Ku Exant chanced upon it in the Arctic tundra and cultivated it. During the decisive battle between the good and evil faction, the good faction was naturally led by our Qing Yun Sect's Qing Yi founder. But this Ku Exant monk was also very famous, especially when he used this Tian Yi celestial sword to fight fiercely with the evil faction's Old Man Blackheart for 3 days and 3 nights. In the end, he severely injured Old Man Blackheart and got rid of a big threat for our good faction. It was said that at that time, only Tianya's celestial sword was able to restrain the evil sect's most ferocious object, sinister orb. From then on, Tianya's name resounded throughout the world, becoming a magical weapon that cultivators yearn for even in their dreams. But I heard that after Ku Exant Shangren passed away, this Tianya disappeared. I didn't expect it to fall into the hands of Small Bamboo Valley. Then Issa shook his head, said, "Shao Fan shitty. Now that Anan has this magical weapon, I'm afraid we have no hope in this tournament." Sha Danan was not disappointed. He never thought he could achieve anything. But seeing Issa's disappointed look, he felt strange, asked, Tseng Shi Xiang, didn't you tell me you were not interested in this tournament? Why are you so disappointed? Issa's face blushed, said, "But if we can stand on the stage until the end, it is still very impressive, don't you think?" Sha Danan laughed. Issa saw his strange look. He felt a little embarrassed. He punched him, smiled. "What are you laughing at?" Before he finished, he also laughed. The two of them smiled as they walked to another arena to watch another match. On this day, except for Sha Danan. Among the 7 Bamboo Peak disciples, for 1 and 3 lost. Xavion, Hidi, Hidaji, and Amanla all entered the next round. Including the lucky Sha Danan, 5 of the 8 Bamboo Peak disciples advanced to the next round. This was a good result, rarely seen in hundreds of years. Tion Belize was so happy that he could not close his mouth. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.